Caldera Spoke was a monument to improbable survival, a silver spindle hanging in the black against the violent orange canvas of the planet Caldera. The star it orbited was a sullen red giant, but Caldera itself was the main attraction, a world of unending volcanic fury. Its surface was a roiling sea of magma, a constant, churning inferno that spat plumes of superheated gas into the thin, toxic atmosphere. The spoke, however, existed in a state of carefully engineered grace, a neutral territory rotating in the planet's Lagrange point. It was a place where academics from 100 worlds studied the impossible geology below, where corporate entities traded technologies that blurred the line between miracle and weapon, and where political rituals were performed with the gravity of cosmic law. Avery Cole knew the station's guts better than anyone. His official title was Ecosystems Maintenance Engineer, Grade 4. He was the man who kept the recycled air tasting more like air and less like the inside of a mechanic's boot. He calibrated the biofilters in the vast arboretums that separated the residential sectors, and he ensured the water reclamation systems did not make anyone grow a third eye. It was a good cover. It was, he often thought, a depressingly accurate reflection of his own internal state, a man constantly performing maintenance on the filters that kept the universe out. His real job was quieter. He was a non-designated field monitor for the Human Diaspora Trust, a civilian organization with a deceptively simple mandate: get ordinary people out of the way before proxy wars and political realignments turn them into collateral damage. Avery was good at it because he could listen, not just with his ears. Avery possessed the threshold, a genetic quirk, a mental anomaly, a curse he polished daily. He could feel the psycho-quantum lattice of other species. To him, the bustling concourses of Caldera Spoke were a psychic roar. The amphibious xylos hissed in discordant, wet chords of anxiety. The crystalline Kathir vibrated with the cold, complex logic of geological time. And the Cylindri, the new arrivals, sang with a resonance that felt like staring into a miniature sun. Most humans just registered as a dull, familiar static. He spent every waking moment of his life with his mental shields clamped down, a self-imposed vow of non-interference. He would not use it, would not manipulate the lattice of another being, unless it was the only way to save a life. The effort left him perpetually tired and craving silence. The political hum on the station was almost as loud as the psychic one. The asteroid, the vast interstellar empire of the Cylindri, was on the verge of signing a landmark trade agreement with the Federated Human Continuum. Empress Saravine, a ruler known for her unnerving blend of ancient ritual and brutal pragmatism, was pushing the treaty through. But a faction known as the Pale Tribunal, a radical Cylindri group, wanted no part in it. They preached a doctrine of racial purity and isolationism, and their broadcasts, usually confined to the darknet, were growing bolder. They wanted to shatter the peace, to prove that humans and Cylindri could only ever be enemies. All of this was why Avery Cole's apartment on level 42 was his sanctuary. It was small, sterile, and, above all, quiet. And it was about to get 20% more expensive, thanks to the station's new infrastructure surcharge. Avery studied his budget on a datapad, the numbers glowing in the dim light. He sighed. He did not want to do it. He needed the solitude to decompress, to let his shields down just a fraction and bleed off the psychic pressure. But the math was inflexible. He navigated to the station's internal housing matrix. He typed in the application for a cohabitant, his fingers moving with grim reluctance. He skipped past the options for species preference, cultural compatibility, and shared interests. He scrolled down to a simple text box labeled Specific Requirements. He typed one word, quiet. He submitted the form and leaned back, already dreading the small talk, the shared space negotiations. The inevitable noise. 3 days later, the notification came. It was not from station housing. It was a formal communiqué, embossed with the 8-pointed spiral of the asteroid. His terminal chimed, a melodic, 3-note sound that was far too elegant for his cheap apartment. An official summons. His presence was requested at Docking Bay 9, in 2 hours, to receive his new, assigned cohabitants. Plural. Avery felt a spike of adrenaline. Assigned was a political word, not a housing one. He read the attached manifest. His blood ran cold. Cultural exchange delegation, civilian accommodation mandate, under the direct authority of Empress Saravine. 3 names were listed. All of them were Cylindri. "You have got to be kidding me," he whispered to the empty room. He had asked for one quiet roommate. The universe, in its infinite sense of humor, was sending him 3 members of a species whose minds resonated like tuning forks, under a diplomatic mandate. He was at the docking bay exactly 2 hours later, wearing his cleanest maintenance uniform, a sleek, obsidian black ship, looking more like a sliver of night than a spacecraft, was already docked. The airlock hissed open. The first to emerge was all sharp angles and sharper eyes. She was tall, even for a Cylindri, and wore a deep blue tunic that was both practical and achingly sophisticated. Her silver hair was cut short, and her gaze swept the docking bay, cataloging exits, security personnel, and potential threats before it finally landed on him. She did not just look at him. She seemed to itemize him. Avery Cole, her voice was a crisp alto, laced with authority. Before he could answer, the second sister moved to flank her. This one was shorter, broader, and radiated a stillness that was almost terrifying. Where the first was a blade, this one was a shield. Her dark hair was braided tightly, and her eyes, a deep, fathomless black, missed nothing. She carried 2 large equipment cases, and she moved with an economic grace that suggested she could kill him with either of them, or her bare hands, before he could even blink. The third sister bounded out last, nearly tripping over the docking ramp. She was a whirlwind of motion and bright, copper-colored hair. Her arms loaded with a stack of datapads and a large, potted plant with purple leaves. "Oh, stars. The gravity plating here is at least 0.98 standard. You can feel the drag on the metatarsals. Can't you, Mira? I told you the initial reports were off by at least 2%. And look," she beamed at Avery, her smile wide and utterly disarming. "He has the exact epidermal pigmentation the historical files predicted for a subsector 4 maintenance engineer. How wonderfully typical." The first one, Mira, stepped forward, ignoring the outburst. "I am Mira. This is my sister, Sable." She nodded to the silent one. "And this," she sighed, "is Junia." "It's a pleasure to meet you all," Avery said, his voice flat. He felt the triple thrum of their minds. 3 distinct notes played on the same impossibly powerful instrument. Junia was a bright, chaotic cascade of intellectual curiosity. Sable was a single, low, unwavering note of absolute focus. And Mira was a complex, layered symphony of tactical analysis, suspicion, and a deeply buried thread of exhaustion. His shield strained. "I think there has been a mistake. My application was for 1 roommate." Mira arched a perfect, silver eyebrow. "There is no mistake. Engineer Cole, the Empress was moved by your request for interspecies cooperation. She felt a single individual was an insufficient representation of the asteroid's commitment to cultural exchange. We are your new cohabitants. The Pact of Cohabitation is being drawn up as we speak." The what?" "A formality," Mira said dismissively, though her eyes suggested it was anything but. A standard Asteroid leasing agreement. Now, if you would show us to our quarters, Sable is anxious to calibrate the apartment's security protocols. Sable just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Right, Avery said, the word feeling dry and inadequate. This way to our quarters. The walk to the residential sector was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Junia wanted to stop at every viewport, every public information terminal, and every food kiosk, peppering Avery with questions about atmospheric processing, social structures, and the tensile strength of the station's hull. Mira walked beside him, her questions sharper and far more unsettling. She asked about power grid redundancies, peak traffic times on the transit system, and the response time of station security. Sable walked behind them all, a silent, watchful shadow. Avery felt a migraine building. The combined force of their presence was like a physical weight, pressing against his mental defenses. He was so focused on managing his shields, on filtering their overlapping mental resonance, that he almost missed the first tremor. It was slight, a barely perceptible vibration through the deck plating, but it was followed by a sound, a dull, distant whump that was felt more than heard. Junia stopped talking mid-sentence about fungal-based insulation. The lights in the concourse flickered. Then, the alarms began to sound, not the loud, urgent klaxons of a hull breach, but the rising, panicked chime of a civil disturbance. Avery's datapad chimed, a harsh, official tone. He looked down. A station-wide alert. Explosion. Academy Market. Sector Gamma. 3 levels down, but adjacent to the primary residential spire. His spire. He looked up and met Mira's gaze. Her playful, diplomatic mask was gone. Her face was stone. Where? She demanded. Academy Market, Avery said, his voice tight. He could feel it now, even with his shields locked down. A distant, rising wave of raw panic, pain, and confusion from hundreds of minds. A psychic scream that clawed at his defenses. He winced, fighting to block it out. A new alert popped up on his datapad. This one was not from station security. It was a dark net feed, a splinter broadcast. A sigil flashed on the screen, a pale, shattered circle. The Pale Tribunal. A distorted voice spoke over the image, claiming responsibility for the cleansing of the alien-tainted market. It was a small bomb, the voice boasted. A warning. The next would not be. They are here, Sable said. It was the first time he had heard her speak. Her voice was a low, rough whisper, like stones shifting. They knew we were arriving, Mira said, her eyes scanning the crowds that were now beginning to surge, pushing toward the transit system. This was for us. Before Avery could process this, another figure appeared, pushing through the panicked civilians. A Cylindri. This one in the formal, silver and black robes of an Imperial courier. The courier ignored the crowd, his movements serene and precise. He stopped 3 paces from Mira and bowed deeply. Then, he turned to Avery. Avery Cole, the courier announced, his voice cutting cleanly through the noise of the alarms. By the will of Her Imperial Majesty, Empress Saravine, the Pact of Cohabitation is offered. He produced a glowing data slate and a simple, elegant stylus that seemed to drink the light in the corridor. This is insane, Avery hissed, the psychic noise of the crowd making his teeth ache. We have an emergency. I need to get to my post. This is the emergency, Mira countered, stepping in front of him. Her eyes were chips of ice. The tribunal has claimed responsibility. They attacked a civilian target on the day of our arrival. We are now high-priority targets. That bomb was on a residential concourse. Engineer Cole, your concourse. They are threatening your home. What does that have to do with this pact? It is not a leasing agreement, Mira said, her voice dropping low. It is a ritual of binding, a Selendri tradition. By signing, you declare our dwelling, your apartment, as sovereign Asterit-protected territory under civilian law. You, as the primary resident, become our formal protector under the treaty. Protector, I am a maintenance engineer. What you need is station security, a military escort. We do not have that, Mira said, her voice sharp with suppressed anger. This is a neutral station. Our formal guard contingent is restricted to the diplomatic sector. Here, we are civilians, and so are you. By signing, you formally bind us to you, and you to us. You grant us the protection of your civilian status, and in return, what? In return, we are bound to protect you. Avery looked from the stoic courier to the data slate. This was a political nightmare. He wanted no part of it. His job for the Trust was to avoid these entanglements, to be invisible. But Mira was right. The bomb had been close. It was a threat not just to them, but to everyone on the level, to the thousands of civilians who just wanted to live their lives. His code, the one that drove him to join the Trust, flared to life. He was not a soldier. He was a rescuer. And right now, a threat had been made against innocent people on his floor. If I sign, this stops, he asked. The tribunal backs off. No, Mira said honestly, but it changes the game. It binds us. It activates certain protocols. It makes us a formal, unified household, with all the legal and ritual protections that entails. They attacked us as loose individuals. This forces them to attack a protected, unified entity. Avery looked at the stylus. He thought of the psychic scream from the market, the raw, unfiltered terror. He had built his life around containing his power, around not getting involved. But the tribunal had brought the war to his doorstep. They had targeted civilians. They had threatened his home, the one place he could be quiet. Fine, Avery said. He grabbed the stylus from the courier's hand. The material was warm, almost alive. The ritual requires a mark of intent, the courier said softly. On the slate, Avery pressed the tip to the glowing surface. The moment it touched, the universe snapped into focus. It was not a sound. It was not a light. It was a connection. He felt a profound, sudden, and overwhelming click in the deepest part of his mind. The chaotic, roaring noise of the station, the psychic screams from the market, the panic in the concourse, it all vanished. It was not gone, but it was buffered. A new sensation flooded his senses. It was cool, white, and resonant. It felt like 3 strands of immensely strong, impossibly fine silk wrapping around his own frayed, burning consciousness. He felt the 3 distinct presences Junia, a bright, intricate lattice of joyful curiosity; Sable, a deep, grounded, immovable foundation of protective loyalty; and Mira, a complex, stunning web of crystalline logic, fierce will, and startlingly deep-seated compassion. He felt them, and, through the connection, he felt them feel him. He felt the crown lattice, the shared mind structure of the Selendri, and in that same instant, his own threshold, his burning, barely controlled power, slotted into it. It was like a key finding its lock. The threshold burn, the constant, sizzling static at the edges of his mind. The power he always fought to contain did not vanish. It settled. It was grounded. The unbearable heat was drawn off, stabilized, and harmonized by the cool, complex resonance of the 3 sisters. He let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He opened his eyes. Junia was staring at him, her mouth open in a perfect O of astonishment, her plant forgotten. Sable's rigid posture had softened, just a fraction, her eyes wide with a shock that was almost fright. And Mira, Mira was staring at him, as if she had never seen him before. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a stunning, unnerving clarity. All her tactical assessments, all her diplomatic shields, were gone. She was seeing him, the real him, the power he kept chained in his own mind, now laid bare and interwoven with her own. The courier bowed, collected the slate, and disappeared back into the crowd as if he had never been. The alarms were still sounding, but they seemed very far away. The apartment, Avery's quiet place, was no longer his alone. It was a fortress. Mira was the first to find her voice. It was low, and every trace of her earlier persona, the diplomat, the strategist, was gone. This was something else. "You," she said, her voice shaking almost imperceptibly, "are not an ecosystems engineer." Avery leaned back against the bulkhead. The cool metal, a stark contrast to the sudden, profound warmth of the new bond thrumming in his chest. He felt calm. For the first time in his adult life, the psychic noise of the universe was not screaming at him. He was shielded, but not by his own power. He was anchored. He looked at the three Selendri sisters, his new roommates, his new, terrifying, and completely unasked for pact-bound family. "My rent," Avery said, his voice perfectly even, "is due on the 1st of the month." The transition from the echoing concourse to the quiet of apartment 42 was like passing through an airlock. The door hissed shut, and for a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the station's primary recyclers. Avery Cole's sanctuary was breached. "It is small," Mira stated, her silver-blue eyes conducting a rapid, dismissive inventory of the space. The apartment consisted of one main living area, with a nutrient paste dispenser alcove, 2 small sleeping pods, and a sanitary room. "It is efficient," Avery said, setting his tool bag by the door. "And it was quiet." "The dimensions are suboptimal for a tactical defense," Sable observed, her voice a low rumble. She was already examining the door's locking mechanism. "The main panel is a standard R3 series. Civilian grade. Pathetic." "I am a civilian," Avery pointed out. "A fact of which we are all painfully, acutely aware," Mira said, walking to the single large viewport. She looked down at the sprawling, intricate tapestry of caldera spoke, levels upon levels of lights, transit tubes, and biodomes, all hanging over the fiery maw of the planet below. "Sable, the exits." "Main door," Sable reported, "and one priority maintenance shaft, designation 42 Delta, behind the primary nutrient dispenser. Access is rated for atmosphere suit evacuation. Slow, but viable." "Scan it, fortify it," Mira ordered. Junia, meanwhile, had found the alcove Avery called a kitchen. She clapped her hands, a gesture of pure, unadulterated delight. "Oh, wonderful! He has actual spices. Look, Mira, desiccated allium and a Terran basil analog. How beautifully primitive." She immediately began pulling small, glowing data chips from her bag and slapping them onto Avery's mismatched containers. "What are you doing?" Avery asked, watching his paprika get labeled with glowing, complex Selendri script. "Inventory, of course," Junia chirped. "I cannot possibly synthesize a proper nutrient balance unless I know the elemental makeup of our base compounds. Also, I am cross-referencing the station's security manifests with the personnel shift schedules. One moment." She tilted her head, a datapad in one hand, her other hand hovering over a bag of lentils. "Ah, there." "There what?" Avery asked, a new sense of dread creeping up his spine. "The public security patrols on this level are scheduled for a 30% reduction in personnel for the next 3 rotations to compensate for the disturbance in the market sector," Junia said brightly. "They are rerouting power to the diplomatic zones. Typical bureaucratic overreaction." It creates a significant vulnerability window between 3:15 and 4:05 Station Standard Time. Avery stared at her. You hacked Station Security's scheduling database. You have been here for 10 minutes. Hacked? Junia looked offended. Oh, no. Engineer Cole. That would be uncouth. Their public-facing network has a guest access portal that queries the primary roster. They just failed to properly sanitize the query's return data. It is a very basic level security flaw. I shall write them a letter. Sable returned from the maintenance shaft, holding a small silver disc. The lock is replaced, she announced, tapping the main door panel. It chimed with a new, melodic, and deeply unnerving three-note tone. This unit is keyed to our bonded lattice signature. Anyone attempting forced entry will be subjected to a localized psychosonic pulse. It will be unpleasant. What does it do? Avery asked. Sable considered the question. It induces a state of sudden, overwhelming existential dread, followed by a brief but total loss of bowel control. Sable, please, Mira sighed. We are guests. She turned to Avery. We will require the second sleeping pod. There is only one, Avery said. I sleep in the primary. The other is storage. Then you will clear the storage, Mira said. Junia and I will share. Sable prefers to enter a meditative trance in the main living area. She finds the concept of sleep inefficient. I find it a tactical vulnerability, Sable corrected, her black eyes unblinking. Avery looked at the three sisters who had completely and totally annexed his life in the span of 15 minutes. The quiet apartment he had craved was now a diplomatic fortress, a hacker's den, and a martial arts dojo, all occupied by women who could probably hear his thoughts. Except, he realized, they could not. The new bond, the crown lattice, was not a one-way mirror. It was a filter. The constant, psychic noise of the station was still there, but it was muted, as if someone had finally turned down the volume. His own threshold, the burning static in his head, was quiet. It felt peaceful, and that scared him more than anything else. Look, he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. We need to set ground rules. 1, Junia. You do not tell me about the crimes you are committing. 2, Sable. You warn me before you install any more dread inducers. 3, Mira. You will refer to this as an apartment, not suboptimal quarters. Mira almost smiled. It was a tiny, fractional upturning of her lips. A reasonable proposal. In return, we have one request. What? Show us your station, Mira said. Not the diplomatic reception, sanitized concourse version. You are a maintenance engineer. You are a civilian. Show us the civilian spoke. Show us the places you go, the people you know. Show us the real station. Avery hesitated. His world, the one he had built for the Trust, was one of shadows and service corridors. It was a world of anonymity. Why? Because, Mira said, her gaze intense. The Pale Tribunal attacked civilians. We need to understand what and who we are now bound to protect. The next day, Avery took them on what he called the low-level tour. He skipped the grand plazas and the glittering academy halls. He took them down, past the commercial levels, to the undercore, the sprawling, chaotic, and vibrant heart of the spoke. Their first stop was a noodle shop in Sector Zeta, run by an 8-foot-tall, 4-armed Kathir named Skorg. The shop was a converted cargo container wedged between a plasma conduit junction and a hydroponics bay. Skorg, whose crystalline carapace was a dull, smoky quartz, clacked his mandibles in greeting. Avery, Skorg's voice rumbled, a sound like gravel shifting. The number 3 filter unit in hydroponics is vibrating at a new harmonic. It is upsetting my fungi. You will fix it. Good to see you too, Scourg, Avery said, sliding onto a stool. 3 bowls of the usual? 1. Just broth. He glanced at the sisters. We will have what you are having, engineer, Mira said, sitting with a delicate, almost comical precision on the rickety stool. Sable stood by the entrance, scanning the crowd. Junia was vibrating with excitement, her eyes wide as she watched Scourg use all 4 arms to simultaneously stir, chop, plate, and serve. The usual was a rich, peppery noodle soup that Avery had long suspected was made with ingredients of questionable legality. It was also the best thing on the station. Mira ate with a focused intensity. Junia slurped hers loudly, earning a sharp look from Mira, which Junia ignored. This broth contains a complex chain polypeptide I have not encountered, Junia announced, holding her chopsticks aloft. It is fascinating. It seems to be derived from a silicon-based life form, but it has been catalytically converted to be digestible by carbon-based systems. Scourg. Your recipe is a masterpiece of interspecies biochemistry. Scourg paused, his forearms frozen. He turned his massive crystalline head to Junia. It is my grandmother's recipe. You talk too much. Eat. From the noodle shop, Avery took them to the Zero-G tea house, a large, spherical chamber in the station's rotational axis, where the gravity was a pleasant, floating null. Patrons, a mix of humans, slender xylos, and tiny, furred creatures Avery did not know the name of, drifted in the air, sipping from bulb-like cups. This is inefficient, Sable stated, her arms crossed as she anchored herself to a hand railing. It encourages a lack of situational awareness. It encourages, Avery said, catching a drifting tea bulb. Calm. He watched Mira, who had unbent enough to push herself gently off the wall, her silver hair fanning out around her head. She drifted for a moment, her eyes closed. Avery felt a brief, unshielded pulse through the bond, not a thought, but a pure, uncluttered feeling of relief, of a weight being lifted. It was gone in an instant. The purpose of this place is social cohesion, Junia murmured, scribbling notes on her datapad as she spun in a slow circle. By removing the shared primary stressor of gravity, individuals are forced to interact in a more cooperative, less defined hierarchy. It's brilliant. They finished the tour at the public hologram library, a cavernous, dark room where beams of light formed archives of 1,000 cultures. They watched a shimmering, light-sculpted history of the first human continuum contact. Then a comedic opera performed by singing xylos. It was normal. It was life. It was everything the Pale Tribunal was not. As they rode the transit car back up to level 42, the mood was different. The apartment felt less like a prison and more like a shared space. You are well liked, Engineer Cole, Mira said quietly, watching the station lights streak past. Scourg gave you an extra helping of noodles. The tea master waived your fee. I fixed their plumbing, Avery said, shrugging. It is a useful skill. No, Mira said, turning to him. They trust you. You move through the station like water. You are a civilian, but you are not. Simple. Avery said nothing. His internal vow screamed at him. He was a monitor, a rescuer. He was not a spy. He was not a soldier. He kept his head down, but the bond with the sisters made that lie harder to maintain. He could feel their constant, simmering purpose to protect their Empress, to find their father's killers, to stop the tribunal. And now, that purpose was braided with his. The next morning, Avery went to work. He left the 3 sisters in the apartment, an act that felt like leaving 3 unattended plasma torches in a closet full of dry rags. His work took him to the station's cargo bay archives, a vast, cold warehouse of data. He was ostensibly there to recalibrate the atmospheric sensors. His real purpose was to meet a man named Silas, a dockworker union foreman, and one of Avery's key informants for the Diaspora Trust. Silas was a short, wiry man who seemed to be permanently vibrating with nervous energy and information. "It was bad, Avery," Silas said, not meeting his eyes, his hands deftly rewiring a cargo loader's power cell. "The bomb in the market. That was just a noisemaker, a distraction." "Distraction from what?" Avery asked, keeping his voice level, his hands busy on the sensor panel. He had to look the part. "From the real hit. It happened at the same time, 3 levels up, at the Academy Archives, not the public library, the real one. The one where they keep the restricted navigation charts." Avery's blood chilled. "What was stolen?" "Do not know the name," Silas said. "But my cousin's new girlfriend works in archival intake. She said the data core they took was old, ancient, Cylindri, and it was under diplomatic seal, set for transfer to the Continuum as a gesture of goodwill. The transfer was supposed to happen after the treaty was signed. Someone jumped the gun." Avery finished his calibration. "Thank you, Silas." He palmed a small, metallic object and passed it to the foreman. Silas looked at it. It was a small, plastic square. "What is this?" 20% off voucher for any water reclamation filter unit repair. Station-wide," Avery said. "Fully transferable." Silas's eyes lit up. "You are a good man. Avery Cole. A very good man." Avery returned to the apartment to find the main room transformed. Datapads and glowing holoscreens covered every flat surface. Junia and Mira were in the center, speaking in rapid, hushed Cylindri. Sable was, as always, by the door, sharpening a knife that looked less like a weapon and more like a tool for surgically dismantling a small moon. "They stole a map," Avery said, closing the door. 3 sets of eyes snapped to him. "The bombing was a diversion," he continued, "to steal a Cylindri data core from the Academy Archives. A restricted navigation chart." Mira's face went pale. "The Conquered Atlas," she breathed. "What is that?" Avery asked. "It is a problem," Mira said, standing up. "It is not just a map of void lanes, engineer. It is a map of the Crown Lattice itself. The old paths. The original connections between our worlds, before the schism. It shows the locations of the ancient Cylindri oratories, conduction points for the lattice. If the tribunal has it." "They can do more than bomb a market," Junia finished, her voice small and tight, all trace of her earlier levity gone. "They can find the nodes. They can cut them. They can unmake us." "And not just you," Avery said, the pieces clicking into place. "The Atlas maps the lanes connecting Caldera to your network. This station is a neutral meeting point. If they can use the Atlas to turn Caldera into a weapon, a choke point for your lattice, they can sever the connection between our two peoples permanently," Mira said. "The treaty will fail. The Continuum will see us as a threat. The tribunal will get the war they have always wanted." The room was silent. Avery looked at the sisters. He was in. He was all the way in. His vow of non-interference felt very small, very cold, and very, very naive. "All right," Avery said. "I have a network, the Human Diaspora Trust. We specialize in finding things that do not want to be found. Smuggling routes, hidden manifests. If the tribunal is moving the Atlas off station, I can find the route." Mira looked at him, her suspicion warring with a new, grudging respect. "Use it. Find them." For the next 2 days, Avery worked his network. He did not use the threshold. He used his skills. He used the trust he had built over 5 years of being the quiet, helpful maintenance man. He called in favors. He traded repair coupons for Port Authority manifests. He cross-referenced shipping manifests with rumors he heard from Xylo's bartenders. He learned the Pale Tribunal structure on the station. The public face was a man named Executor Thale, a charismatic and cold Selendri diplomat who had been publicly protesting the treaty. Thale's security was handled by a group called the Archivists, rare humans and Selendri who had total recall memory and could store vast amounts of data without electronic aid, making them impossible to scan. And their muscle, the ones who did the wet work, were called the Null Choir. Null Choir, Junia murmured, her face pale as she read the data Avery had pulled from a darknet forum. I have read about them. They are not just soldiers. They are anti-psychics. They do not have a lattice. They project a field that cancels it. A null space. To be near them is to feel your own mind, your own soul, being erased. We need to meet someone, Avery said, grabbing his tool bag. A new source. He is nervous. He wants to meet on neutral ground. Somewhere public, but quiet. The Arboretum, Mira guessed. Level 22. The one with the Terran analog biosphere. It's my work route, Avery said. I am due to check the humidity sensors. The Arboretum on level 22 was one of the spoke's quiet marvels. A vast, domed chamber filled with genetically engineered Earth analog trees, ferns, and a synthesized, warm, damp air that smelled of soil and chlorophyll. It was the only place on the station that felt like his long-lost homeworld. They went in pairs. Avery and Mira went first, disguised as a maintenance engineer and his diplomatic attaché overseeing the work. Sable and Junia followed 10 minutes later, as civilians enjoying the park. Avery was checking a sensor panel near a large, artificial waterfall when a young man stepped out from behind a curtain of hanging moss. He was human, barely 20, and vibrating with a terror so profound Avery could almost smell it. His eyes, wide and bloodshot, darted everywhere. You are Cole, the kid whispered. I am, Avery said. You are Thomas. Thomas Bell, the kid said, wringing his hands. I worked for them, for the tribunal, as an archivist. I just held the data. You know they said it was for history, for preserving their heritage. What data, Thomas? Mira asked, her voice calm and steady. Everything. Shipping routes, bomb components. But then they brought in the new data, the Atlas. I saw it. I saw what they were planning. And they have my sister, Anna. She is not an archivist. They just took her as insurance to make sure I keep holding their data. Where is the Atlas now, Thomas? Avery asked, keeping his voice low. It is not on the station, not anymore. Thale has it, but the data. I copied a fragment, a signal trace. It is all I could get. It leads. He never finished the sentence. A sound, like a chord being struck on a broken piano, echoed through the arboretum. It was a sound, but it was not a sound. It was an anti-sound. Avery felt it first in his teeth, a painful, cold vibration. Then it hit the bond. The warm, steady connection to the three sisters instantly dissolved, replaced by a horrifying, icy void. The psychic buffer was gone. The full, screaming, chaotic roar of the station crashed into Avery's unshielded mind, 1,000 times louder than before. He cried out, staggering, clutching his head. Null field, Mira yelled, drawing a small, sleek energy pistol from her tunic. Junia and Sable were suddenly at their side. Junia dragging Thomas to the ground, Sable placing herself in front of them all. 5 figures in matte black armor emerged from the trees. They wore helmets of mirrored black glass, and they carried weapons that looked like tuning forks. The Null Choir. Sable met the first one. It was not a fight. It was a collision. The choir member lunged, his tuning fork weapon crackling with black, negative energy. Sable did not dodge. She met the blow, her own blade, now in her hand, singing as it cut the air. There was a soundless explosion of force, and Sable was thrown back, skidding across the forest floor, her arms smoking. Sable, Junia screamed. "Get the asset," Mira yelled, firing her pistol. The energy bolt simply dissolved, a few feet from the choir members, eaten by the null field. One of the choir members ignored the sisters. He was moving toward Avery, who was on his knees, his hands pressed to his temples, trying to re-erect his mental shields. The noise was unbearable. Every mind on the station was a spike of glass in his brain. "Avery!" Mira shouted. The choir member stood over him. Avery could see his own, pain-contorted reflection in the black glass helmet. The man raised his weapon. Avery looked up, his eyes bleeding psychic overload. He felt the burning static of his threshold swell inside him. He could stop this. He could let it go. He could unleash the raw, unfiltered power of his mind and burn this null field away. He could incinerate this man from the inside out. He could silence the noise. His hand rose. The power gathered. A white-hot, furious inferno. He felt the chlorophyll in the leaves of the trees around him begin to heat. The air crackled. The ground smoked. He saw the fear in the choir member's body language, the first he had ever seen. He saw the leaves on the ancient, priceless trees begin to curl and blacken. He saw the faces of the diaspora trust victims he had pulled from burning worlds. "I will not use it, unless it is to save a life." This was not saving. This was vengeance. This was a loss of control. He would destroy the entire Arboretum. He would kill everyone in it. Avery screamed, a raw, human sound of ultimate denial. He forced the power down. He choked it. He shoved the inferno back into its cage, and the effort was a physical agony. He collapsed, unconscious, as the choir member's weapon descended. The blow never landed. A heavy, gray uniformed body slammed into the choir member, tackling him. "Station security," a voice boomed. "Drop your weapons now." Captain Imani Rhodes stood over Avery, her standard-issue kinetic pulse rifle smoking. She was a tall, dark-skinned woman, with her hair in tight, practical cornrows, and a look on her face that suggested she had eaten bureaucratic red tape for breakfast. Her team, a dozen officers in full riot gear, was already engaging the rest of the Null Choir, who, seeing their advantage lost, were already retreating into the trees. "Get up, Cole!" Captain Rhodes snapped, nudging him with her boot. Avery groaned, his head feeling like it had been split open and hollowed out. The null field was gone, and the cool, steadying presence of the lattice bond snapped back into place. A sudden, blessed relief. He saw Mira and Junia helping Sable, who was clutching her badly burned arm. What happened?" Avery mumbled. "My shift commander," Rhodes said, hauling him to his feet. "Gets a report that a maintenance engineer is running a diagnostic in the Arboretum with 3 Cylindri observers. On the same day, my new tribunal defector informant, Thomas Bell, is scheduled to meet his contact. I may be a station cop, Cole, but I am not an idiot." "He is our asset," Mira said, stepping forward, her pistol gone, her hand supporting Sable. "He is my witness," Rhodes countered, her eyes hard. "And you all just compromised him. Get back to your apartment, all of you, now, before I have to file a report, and I hate filing reports." They limped back to apartment 42. The silence was heavy. Sable was being tended to by Junia, who was applying a bioregenerative paste to her arm. Avery was sitting at the table, his head in his hands, nursing the worst psychic overload headache of his life. Mira stood in front of him, her arms crossed. "You have secrets, engineer," she said, her voice quiet. Avery did not look up. He was too tired. The memory of the power, the heat, was too close. "My secret," he said, his voice hoarse, "is that I make bone broth with deionized water. It gives it a cleaner flavor profile." Mira stared at him for a long, hard moment. The corners of her mouth twitched. "You almost destroyed a billion-credit biosphere. Avery." "I did not," he whispered. "No," she said. "You did not. You chose not to. There is a difference." "Where is Thomas?" Avery asked, changing the subject. "With Captain Rhodes. He is safer with her, for now." "But he gave this to me," Junia said, walking over. Her usual brightness was gone, replaced by a grim focus. She held up a small, crystal data chip. "The signal trace he copied, the fragment from the Atlas." She slotted it into their main console. The holographic display lit up, not with a map, but with a complex, shifting pattern of energy signatures. It looked like a song, written in light. "It is." "A harmonic key," Junia breathed, her fingers flying over the console. "It is not a location. It is a resonance frequency. The Atlas is not just a map. It's a key. And this fragment, it is pointing to something. Something old. Something here, inside the spoke, deep in the core." "Where?" Mira demanded. Junia's fingers stopped. A new schematic appeared on the screen, a section of the station's core structure that was officially listed as Decommissioned Service Junction. But the resonance signal was painting a new image over the old plans, an image of chambers, altars, and conduction spires. "A hidden oratory," Mira whispered, her eyes wide with a terrible, dawning comprehension. "Echelon oratory. It was rumored to be the first one built. We thought it was a myth." "It is not a myth," Junia said, pointing to a single, pulsing light on the schematic. "And that is where the Conquered Atlas is being broadcast from. Executor Thale. He is already there. He is not trying to leave the station. He is trying to use the Atlas to activate the oratory and sing his null song from the very heart of the lattice itself." The decommissioned service junction on the station's official schematics was a lie. Avery Cole knew that. Every station had its gray spaces, its forgotten corners, where the original construction plans and the current reality no longer aligned. Junia's holographic map led them deep into the station's metallic skeleton, to a section of the core that hummed with a low, primal energy. "The thermal levels here are 20% higher than in any other maintenance sector," Avery said, his voice low. He was in his element now, reading the station's true diagnostic, the language of its heat and stress. "We are close to a primary power conduit." "Or a door," Junia whispered. They were not alone. As they rounded a final corner in the cramped, dimly lit accessway, they found Captain Imani Rhodes waiting for them. She was not in her crisp security uniform. She wore dark, civilian-grade work clothes, her pulse rifle slung casually over her shoulder. Beside her, looking small and utterly terrified, was the young archivist, Thomas Bell. "I hate this, Cole," Rhodes said, her voice a low growl that echoed in the metal tunnel. "I absolutely hate this. My station, my jurisdiction, and I am sneaking around it like a delinquent. But my witness," she jerked her head toward Thomas, "insists your new roommates are the only ones who understand the music Thale is playing. And my gut says Executor Thale is the real threat, not you." "Captain," Avery inclined his head. "Glad you could make it. We are a temporary, unofficial unit," Rhodes stated, making it clear. "The moment this is done, you are coming to my office, and you are filing a report so long it will make the station's primary computer weep. Bell, tell them what you told me." Thomas stepped forward, wringing his hands. He could barely meet their eyes. The tribunal. They are not just trying to stop a treaty. They are. They are trying to purify the galaxy. They think the lattice, they think empathy, is a contamination, a weakness that holds back true, clean civilization. We know this, Mira said, her voice sharp, sable, her burned arm, wrapped in a shimmering, silver-colored regenerative paste, stood beside her, her good hand never straying from the hilt of her blade. But you do not know how, Thomas said, his voice cracking. They have been taking people, for months, not just Selendri, humans, Xylos, anyone who registered as having high empathy. They took my sister, Anna, because she just cries at holodramas. They took them, and they test the null hymn on them. A cold, sick dread settled over the group. They play the song, Thomas continued, tears welling in his eyes. The anti-sound. They play it until the person just stops feeling. They become empty, hollow. It is how they perfected the song. It is a weapon that does not kill the body. It kills the connection. They want to cut the link between species. They want to bring their pure order by making everyone alone. The silence that followed was heavier than the tons of metal above them. Mira was the one who broke it, her voice dangerously quiet. Executor Thala. He was my father's protege, years ago, before he found the tribunal. Before the coup. Avery looked at her. Through the crown lattice, he felt a sudden, sharp spike of her grief. It was not the warm sadness he associated with human loss. It was cold, sharp, and precise, like shards of broken glass. My father, Mira continued, her gaze distant, fixed on the bulkhead, believed in the original crown lattice, the one that was meant to include humans, to bind us all. He was killed for that belief. They called him a traitor, a contaminationist, and Thala was there. He stood by and watched my father die. He called it a necessary cleansing. She took a ragged breath. The Empress, my mother, she only survived because her bond to us, her daughters, was strong enough to anchor her own lattice. We are her 3 daughter anchors. If Thala succeeds, he is not just stopping a treaty. He is finishing what he started. He is murdering our father all over again. Our motive, engineer, she said, her voice hardening, is to protect our mother, and to bring the man who orchestrated our father's death to justice. Then let us go get him, Rhodes said, her voice flat. Junia, where is this magical door? Junia stepped up to a blank, solid wall of fused, ancient metal. It bore no markings, no controls. The map says it is not a door, Junia said. It is a resonance lock. It is waiting for a key. A key we do not have, Sable noted, her dark eyes scanning the tunnel for threats. Yes, we do, Junia said. She placed her palm flat against the cold metal. She closed her eyes. Then, she began to hum. It was the melody from the data chip, the fragment Thomas had stolen, a complex, haunting tune of rising and falling notes. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the metal wall began to hum back. The tone was impossibly deep, a vibration that shook the dust from the ceiling. The solid wall shimmered, the metal molecules unlocking, and irised open, revealing a dark, cavernous space beyond. Well, Avery said, adjusting the tool bag on his shoulder. I will be damned. They stepped through the opening into the echelon oratory. The chamber was vast, and it had not been built by human or Selendri hands. It had been grown. The air was dry and smelled of static electricity and millennia. The walls were not metal. They were a dark, semi-translucent material that looked like smoked quartz. all of it pulsing with a faint, internal, violet light. Spirit crystal. This, this is a primary conduction node, Junia whispered, her voice filled with a scholar's awe. This entire chamber, it is a living part of the lattice. In the center of the vast, circular room stood a raised altar, not of stone, but of a single, massive, perfect crystal. It vibrated with a silent, contained power. Mira, Sable, and Junia moved toward it, as if pulled by an invisible tide. Thomas and Rhodes hung back, their weapons raised, covering the entrance. Avery walked with the sisters, his threshold humming in response to the chamber. The background noise of the station was gone. Here, there was only one sound, the deep, resonant, impossibly old song of the crown lattice. The three sisters reached the altar. They looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. Then, as one, they placed their hands on the crystal surface. The instant they touched it, the oratory ignited. The violet light in the spirit crystal walls flared to a blinding, pure white. The crystal altar pulsed, sending a wave of energy, of information, through the chamber. It struck Avery, and it did not hurt. It was not a blast, but an embrace. He felt the connection to the sisters, the crown lattice, expand. It was not just the three of them anymore. It was a chorus of thousands, millions, a choir of voices, of minds, of memories, stretching back before the asteroid was even formed. And then, he saw, his mind, amplified by his own threshold, and now plugged directly into the lattice, was flooded with a vision. He saw ancient Cylindri, their forms subtly different, their faces bright with purpose. And he saw humans, ancient humans, in simple, archaic spacefaring uniforms. They were working together. They were at a great, starlit loom, weaving threads of light and psychoacoustic energy, the crown lattice. It was not just a Cylindri creation. It was a joint project. A human Cylindri alliance, designed to end the psychic wars that had ravaged their corner of the galaxy, intended to build a bridge of universal empathy. The humans, their minds more chaotic but fiercely creative, were providing a counter-harmony, a structural balance to the Cylindri's psychic power. Then, the vision soured. He saw a man, a human, his face a mask of cold, sharp ambition. He was at the loom, alone, introducing a new thread, a black, dead thread, a null frequency, a virus. He saw the human faction break away, their faces twisted with a new, dark ideology. Fear. A fear of being subsumed, of losing their individuality to the whole. They called the project a contamination. The alliance shattered. The Cylindri retreated, heartbroken. The human architects who had helped, their names were stricken, their memories suppressed, their descendants exiled. The great betrayal. The vision did not stop. It shifted, accelerating through time, focusing. The data stream from the altar was not just history. It was a live feed. It was Thale's data. Avery saw a new scene. Hecate Reach. His breath caught in his throat. It was a human agricultural colony. He saw the ships, sleek, black, unmarked. He saw tribunal crews, painting crude, imitative Cylindri markings on the hulls. He saw them deploy their weapons, not energy pulses, not kinetic rounds, fire, a chemical incendiary that burned with a sick, orange-green flame. It washed over the colony, over the biodomes, over the prefabricated homes. He saw men, women, and children running, engulfed in the flames. He saw the tribunal archivists, filming, documenting. He heard the news reports, broadcast an hour later over the Continuum network. Cylindri extremists, a solemn news anchor announced, have claimed responsibility for the Hecate Reach massacre, a brutal retaliation for He stumbled back, ripping his hand away from the bond. Though it was not a physical connection. He was on his knees, gasping. He knew that fire. He knew that smell. He was a child. He was 4 years old. He was hiding in a reinforced nutrient silo, the metal hot against his cheek. He was peeking through a crack, watching his mother, watching his home. He had been the only survivor. The Diaspora Trust had found him. 3 days later, mute and starving. The power inside him, the threshold, which he had spent his entire life caging, erupted. It was not the hot, panicked flare from the Arboretum. This was something new. This was a cold, white-hot nova of absolute, perfect rage. The air in the oratory crackled. The spirit crystals in the walls dimmed. Their light-drinking energy pulled toward him. He wanted Thale. He wanted to find him, to open his threshold, and to unmake him. He wanted to burn the pale tribunal from the galaxy, to leave nothing but ashes and silence. I will not use it, unless it is to save a life. The vow was a hollow whisper in the inferno of his mind. A hand touched his shoulder. He looked up. It was Mira. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. She was not touching him physically. She was touching him through the lattice. Her mind was a cool, steadying presence against his burning rage. I see it. Avery. Her voice echoed in his mind. Not in words, but in pure intent. The fire. What they did to you. It is what they did to my father. Do not let it consume you. Do not become them. We will take him together, not for revenge, for justice. He looked at her, at the shared trauma in her eyes. The cold fire in his mind did not go out. It did not dim, but it focused. It turned from a nova into a precision blade. He would not just burn Thale. He would break him. Avery got to his feet, his entire body shaking. He blamed you, he whispered, his voice a hoarse rasp. He killed my people, and he blamed yours. This is their way, Mira said, her own voice tight. They use memory as a weapon. They use our pain to divide us. My gods! Cole, Captain Rhodes said, stepping forward, her rifle lowered. I knew you were trust, but... Hecate Reach. I never knew. Avery took a single, shuddering breath, locking the rage down, turning it into fuel. Junia, he said, his voice hard and new. Find the center. Find Thale. Now. Junia, her face streaked with tears, was already at the altar, her hands flying over its crystalline surface. The Atlas broadcast. It is not here. This chamber is just an amplifier, a relay. The main vault, the vault of Atlas, is below us, deeper in the core. It is, oh stars, it is shielded by a containment field. Can we get through? Avery demanded. The main door is... No, Junia said, shaking her head. Psychosonic locks. They would tear our minds apart before we got close. But, she pointed. A holographic schematic flared to life above the altar, a map of the station's ancient, forgotten guts. There, a primary thermal conduit. It runs from the station's core heat exchanger and vents past the vault's shielding. It is an old pipe. It will be hot, Avery said, already moving. I am maintenance. I do hot. We will be exposed, Sable said, moving with him. Passive scanners will detect us. She reached into her pack and pulled out several thin, shimmering cloaks. Biological analog stealth. They mimic ambient heat and light signatures. Not perfect, but they will mask us. She handed one to Avery, one to Rhodes, and one to Thomas. They donned the cloaks. They were cool to the touch, and clung like a damp, second skin. Avery found the access hatch to the conduit, exactly where the schematic said it would be. He used his engineer's multi-tool to cut the ancient, fused-shut lock. With a groan of tortured metal, the hatch opened, revealing a dark, round tunnel. A wave of scalding air washed over them. "This way," Avery said, and plunged into the darkness. The pipe was narrow, dark, and suffocatingly hot. The only sound was the metallic scrape of their boots and the deep, metabolic thrum, thrum, thrum of the station core. They crawled for what felt like hours. Finally, Avery saw a grate. He gestured for them to stop. He peered through. They were in a massive, spherical chamber. The center of the chamber was a black, reflective crystal sphere, floating, suspended, in a web of energy, the Vault of Atlas. And on a floating platform directly in front of it stood Executor Thala. He was tall, ascetic, and wore no mask. His face was almost beautiful, in a severe, cold way, and it was utterly devoid of emotion. He was holding a glowing, spherical device in his hands, its light shifting, flowing. The conquered Atlas. He was not alone. Flanking the platform, in a perfect circle, stood a dozen members of the Null Choir. Their mirrored black helmets were identical. They were not armed. They were singing. It was the Null hymn, the anti-sound from the Arboretum. But this was not a probe, not a small-scale attack. This was a full, amplified chorus. The effect was instantaneous. Avery felt the crown lattice bond shatter. The cool, steadying presence of the three sisters vanished, ripped away from his consciousness. It was an agony worse than any physical blow. He cried out, staggering. He looked back. Mira, Sable, and Junia had collapsed. They were on the floor of the pipe, clutching their heads, their bodies curled in on themselves. The song was not just blocking their power. It was draining it. It was a psychic poison, an auditory void that was telling their minds, their souls, that they did not exist. Rhodes and Thomas were unaffected by the psychic component, but the sheer, dissonant wrongness of the sound made them gag, their faces pale. Avery was stranded. The sudden, agonizing absence of the sisters' minds left a gaping wound in his own. His unanchored threshold flared, the cold rage from Hecate Reach threatening to overwhelm him, to burn him out from the inside. He had to anchor them. He had to give them a signal, a lifeline beneath the Null hymn. He could not fight the song with power. He already knew that would fail. He had to fight it with something else, something human, something real. He crawled back to the three sisters, who were pale and shaking, their eyes unfocused. Thal, on his platform, had not noticed them, his attention entirely focused on the ritual, on the Atlas. "Listen to me," Avery hissed, grabbing Mira's shoulder. She flinched, her eyes empty. "It is so cold," Junia whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Okay," Avery said, his voice desperate, projecting into the void where their bond had been. "Okay, listen. You want to know my secret? The real one. The bone broth." Mira's eyes flickered. She looked at him, her expression one of profound, agonizing confusion. "What?" "The bone broth I make," Avery said, his voice gaining a crazy, desperate confidence. "You think it is just bones. You are wrong. It is the water. It has to be deionized water. I told you that. But the real secret, the one Skorg does not even know, you have to add a single, fossilized trilobite. Just one." Junia let out a tiny, choked sound. "For the mineral profile," Avery pressed on, crawling, so he was in front of all three of them. It gives it a spine, a sense of historical purpose. You do not just drink it. You have to respect it. You cannot make a proper broth without respecting geologic time. Mira, you just cannot. It is wrong. It is disrespectful to the primordial soup. Through her pain, Junia let out a single, sharp, hysterical giggle. That, she gasped, is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. Is it? Avery leaned in. Is it stupider than a song that says you do not exist? That song is a lie. My broth is real. It is complicated and it makes no sense and it is probably a little bit insane, but it is real. Just like us. Focus on me. Focus on the stupid broth. He felt it. Not the grand cosmic connection of the crown lattice. This was something smaller, something messy, and something fiercely, stubbornly alive. A flicker of Junia's defiant humor, a spark of Sable's grudging curiosity, a wave of Mira's profound, overwhelming exasperation at him. It was enough. It was an anchor. The null hymn was still there, a hurricane of cold, but they were in the eye of the storm. The sisters were breathing, their eyes focusing. They were back. They looked up, through the grate, just in time to see Executor Thale slot the glowing Concord Atlas into the black crystal sphere of the vault. The black crystal ignited. The null hymn, amplified 1,000-fold, exploded outward, a wave of pure, cold negation. It was projected out from the oratory, up through the station's core, and beyond, into the void, into the crown lattice itself. It is done, Thale whispered, and his voice was soft, almost reverent. He turned, a cold, thin smile on his face, as if he could feel the collective empathy of the galaxy beginning to dim. He looked down toward the grate, and his smile faltered. He saw them. He saw the 6 of them, huddled in the thermal pipe. A maintenance engineer, 3 refugee princesses, a station cop, and a terrified archivist. The door is closing. Engineer. Thale's voice echoed in the chamber, the sound now carrying the same cold properties of his hymn. The door between hearts, the door between stars, and you are on the wrong side. He raised his hand. The null choir, as one, turned their mirrored, empty faces toward the grate. The moment Thala activated the vault, the null hymn stopped being a localized attack. It became a broadcast. The cold, anti-sound did not just echo in the chamber. It slammed outward, using the station's own energy grid as a conductor. Avery felt it, a 1-2 punch. First, the agonizing rip as the psychic anchor to his stupid, wonderful bone broth story was torn away, leaving him stranded. Second, the scream of the station itself. It was not a human scream. It was the sound of 1,000 minds, of every species, having their connections simultaneously severed. The background static of the spoke, the noise he had spent his life filtering, did not just get loud. It became a symphony of panic. He felt the Cathir's cold logic shatter into fractal fear. He felt the Xylos's wet anxiety ignite into blind terror. He felt the humans, his own people, suddenly filled with a cold, isolating suspicion. The empathy was gone, and in its place, pure, undiluted flight or fight. He did it, Rhodes breathed, her hand on her pulse rifle. The sound in the pipe was now a deafening, dissonant chord. He is broadcasting, station-wide. In the pipe, Mira, Sable, and Junia were on their knees. The null hymn was a direct poison to them. Avery saw their skin turn pale, their breath coming in shallow gasps. The broth, Junia whispered, her voice a thread. It is not loud enough. We have to move, Avery yelled over the din, the sound grating on his skull. He is not at the vault. He is just using its power. He is relaying the signal. Where? Rhodes shouted, hauling Thomas Bell to his feet. The one place with enough power to hit the whole station, Avery said, his mind racing, forcing itself to be an engineer. The main communications tower, Sector Alpha. He has to be at the transmitter. That is halfway across the spoke, Rhodes said. Then we run, Mira said, forcing herself to her feet. She was leaning on Sable, and Sable, in turn, was leaning on the wall of the pipe, but they were standing. He is not just ending a treaty. He is starting a war. They scrambled back through the thermal conduit, a desperate, clumsy retreat. The heat was oppressive, but it was nothing compared to the psychic cold of the hymn. When Avery burst through the maintenance hatch back into the core, the station he had left was gone. The echelon oratory was dark. The spirit crystal walls were dead, their light extinguished by the null song. This way, Avery said, leading them through the service tunnels. The express transit line. When they emerged onto the main concourse of Sector Gamma, they stepped into chaos. It was not a fire. It was a riot of the soul. A group of four-armed Kathir, normally the most placid and logical species, were systematically smashing the viewport of a human-owned shop, their crystalline forms vibrating with aggression. A Xylos family was huddled in a doorway, hissing and spitting at a human security officer who was trying to help them. "Get back!" the officer yelled, his face a mask of confusion and fear. "Just get back, I do not know what you want." The null hymn was insidious. It was not just an absence of empathy. It was an active catalyst for paranoia. Everyone was an enemy. Everyone was a threat. "This," Rhodes said, her voice grim, "is how a world dies." She unslung her rifle. "This is a Civil Disturbance Protocol 0. I am authorizing lethal force suppression." "No," Avery yelled, grabbing her arm. "Do not shoot. They are not themselves. They are just lost. We stop the song. We stop this. We stop the song by getting to the tower. And we get to the tower by moving through this," Rhodes countered. But she did not raise her rifle. "We have one asset to protect." She meant Thomas, who looked ready to faint. "Sable, Junia, protect the asset. Mira, Cole, you are with me. We clear a path." They moved as a unit, a tiny island of coherence in a sea of madness. They were halfway to the transit station when a new threat emerged. Black-armored tribunal soldiers, the archivists, rounded the corner. They were not rioting. They were organized. They were methodical. And they were firing. Not pulse rifles. They were using kinetic weapons. Simple. Old-fashioned. Solid slugs. Vicious. Effective. "Down," Rhodes bellowed, shoving Avery behind a large, decorative planter. A spray of bullets chipped the synthetic marble, sending dust flying. "They are not just stopping the treaty," Mira said, her voice tight as she pulled her own energy pistol. "They are purging the station." "Sable!" Avery yelled. He saw the new threat. A tribunal soldier was taking aim at Thomas, who was frozen in the open. Sable, her bad arm still wrapped in the silver paste, did not hesitate. She moved in a way that seemed to defy physics. She shoved Thomas behind her, raised her good arm, and met the bullet with her bladed vambrace. The sound of the ricochet was a sharp ping, but a second soldier was already firing. A burst of plasma fire, designed to cut through bulkheads, sizzled past her, striking a nearby power conduit. The conduit exploded in a shower of blue-white sparks and scalding, liquid plasma. The fire rained down, cutting Thomas off. "Anna!" Thomas screamed, his mind snapping, thinking of his lost sister. Sable looked at the wall of plasma fire, then at the terrified archivist. She grabbed Thomas by the collar, spun him around, and threw his entire body over her shoulders in a fireman's carry. "Sable! No!" Mira shouted. "The heat!" Sable just ran. She charged directly through the curtain of falling plasma fire. The sparks ignited her tunic. Her hair smoked. Avery heard her grunt, a low, guttural sound of pure, defiant will. She burst through the other side, stumbling, and threw Thomas behind a solid steel kiosk before collapsing to one knee, her back smoking. "The transit car is this way," Avery yelled, his own heart pounding. "We have to go now." He felt a new spike of cold, even through the chaos. The Null Choir. A unit of them was moving up the concourse, their mirrored black helmets turning the fire and the panic into a cold, artistic reflection. Avery grabbed Mira's hand. "We cannot fight them, not here." But the choir was not moving toward them. They were moving toward the transit car, cutting them off. They are ignoring us," Junia said, helping Sable to her feet. "No," Mira said. Her eyes narrowed. "They are not. They are blocking our path. They are hurting us. But they are vulnerable." "Vulnerable how?" Avery asked. "They are cold," Mira said, raising her pistol. "They are coordinated, but they are simple. They lack creativity." She fired. Not at the choir. She fired at the ceiling, at the station's fire suppression system. The bolt hit the sensor panel, and the system, sensing a plasma fire, reacted. A deluge of thick, white, fire-suppressant foam erupted from the ceiling, flooding the concourse. It was a chaotic, brilliant, and completely unexpected move. The rioters screamed, their panic turning to confusion. The Null Choir, suddenly blind, their coordination broken, stopped. "Go!" Mira yelled, grabbing Avery's hand. "Run!" They plunged into the disorienting, knee-deep foam. It was a mad, blind scramble. Avery kept his grip on Mira's hand, using the faint, stubborn pulse of their human Cylindri bond as a compass in the whiteout. They burst out of the foam and directly onto the transit platform. An empty car was just sliding to a stop. "In!" Rhodes yelled, piling them all inside. She slammed the door control, and the car sped away, leaving the chaos behind. They were soaked, smoking, and battered, but they were moving. The car was quiet, save for their ragged breathing and the constant, thrumming, hateful note of the Null hymn. "That," Avery panted, "was impressive." Mira did not look at him. She was reloading the energy cell in her pistol. "They expected us to fight their strength. I fought their weakness. They have no imagination." The transit car sped towards Sector Alpha. Avery looked at the sisters. They were suffering. The hymn was a constant, grinding pressure on their minds. His bone broth anchor was a joke, a story that had worked in a quiet pipe. Here, in the face of the full broadcast, it was not enough. Avery closed his eyes. He hated this. He hated his power. He hated the heat and the noise. But he hated the cold of the hymn more. He remembered the Arboretum. He had almost lost control, almost burned it all. But Mira had been right. He had chosen not to. He made a new choice. He did not unleash his threshold. He calibrated it. He opened the valve, not as a fire, but as a furnace. He drew on the cold, white-hot rage from Hecate Reach. But he did not let it be rage. He filtered it. He turned it into pure, controlled warmth. He reached out, not to the station, but just to them, to the three minds linked to his. He wrapped his power around the crown lattice bond, creating a shield, a buffer. He did not block the Null hymn. He simply harmonized against it. He created a small, mobile, psychosonic sanctuary, a bubble of pure, defiant life. The strain was immediate, and it was excruciating. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His nose began to bleed. But he felt it. He felt Junia's mind, which had been a flickering candle, suddenly blaze with gratitude. He felt Sable's pained, rigid focus relax into a simple, solid presence. He felt Mira's mind, a complex and beautiful fortress under siege, suddenly stabilize. She turned her head and looked at him. Really looked at him. Her silver blue eyes were wide. She saw the cost. She saw the blood on his lip. "Do not," Avery gritted out, the words tasting like copper. "Let this go to your head." The transit car doors opened. They were at the base of the tower. It was worse than the concourse. The area was a war zone. Tribunal forces were holding the entrance against a vastly outnumbered but furious contingent of station security. The air was thick with plasma fire and the scream of kinetics. "This is my stop," Captain Rhodes said, her voice pure, cold steel. She cocked her pulse rifle. "My officers are dying. You three," she pointed to the sisters. "You are with Cole. Get to the top. Shut that song down." "What about you?" Avery asked. "I am the cavalry," Rhodes said. She gave him a hard, sudden smile. "Now get out of my way, engineer." She charged out of the car, her rifle roaring. "This is Captain Rhodes. Hold the line. Hold the line. Damn you." Avery watched her go. "The main entrance is a death trap. We need another way." "The maintenance shaft," Mira said, pointing. "Every comms tower has one." They found it. A simple, unlatched door, which Sable's blade opened in 2 seconds. Inside was a dark shaft, lit only by emergency strobes, filled with a simple, metal ladder that went up, into the darkness. "Up," Avery said. They climbed. The tower was a resonant chamber for the hymn. The sound was deafening, a physical, vibrating force that threatened to shake the ladder apart. Even with Avery's shield, the sisters were struggling. "Keep talking, Avery," Mira panted, her voice echoing in the shaft. She was climbing just below him. "What?" "The broth, the trilobites, the stupid stories. Talk. It helps anchor the shield." "You want a story?" Avery gasped, his arms burning. "Okay. My first week as an engineer. I accidentally flushed an entire sector's worth of recycled water into the nutrient paste vats. For 2 days. Everyone was eating. Water paste." Junia, climbing below Mira, let out a choked laugh. "Was it good?" "It tasted," Avery said, reaching for the next rung. Like despair." Sable, climbing last, carrying the still-dazed Thomas on her one good arm, grunted. "I would like to try this. Despair paste." They were laughing. It was insane. They were climbing a tower, in the middle of a war, with a madman broadcasting a soul-killing song. And they were laughing. "Keep talking, Mira," Avery said, echoing her words, a sudden fierce affection rising in his chest. "Your voice. It is confusing their cold, dead hearts." He felt her surprise, a warm pulse through the bond. They reached the top. The door opened not into a war zone, but into a place of cold, sterile, white calm, the transmission room. It was a vast, circular chamber, its walls a single, 360-degree viewport, showing the spoke, the planet Caldera, and the stars. In the center, a massive, crystalline console thrummed, and Executor Thala was there. He stood before the console, his back to them. The Conquered Atlas, the glowing, spherical map, was docked at the heart of the machine, pulsing with a black, oily light. "It is beautiful, is it not?" Thale said, not turning. He was wearing a mask. It was not the black glass helmet of the choir. This was a smooth, perfect, featureless mask of mirrored silver, like a drop of mercury. It reflected the room, the stars, and the 4 exhausted climbers, distorting them into monsters. "The sound of nothing," Thala continued, his voice amplified, metallic. "The sound of peace, of order. I have freed them, you see, from the burden of compassion, from the chaos of empathy. He turned, his masked face an unsettling, perfect mirror. I am not a tyrant. I am a liberator. You are a murderer, Mira spat, raising her pistol. Words, Thala dismissed. You stand there, a human and 3 contaminated cylindri. A perfect example of the chaos I am ending. A human, burning with a power he dares not use. A cylindri, clinging to a broken, emotional bond. You are an aberration, and you are too late. No, Junia said. Her voice was small, but it cut through the cold. Thala, and everyone else, turned to look at her. She was not looking at Thala. She was looking at a small, secondary auxiliary console, set off to the side. Its screen was dark. He is using the main broadcast array, Junia whispered, walking toward it. But the emergency broadcast channel. He did not even bother to lock it. Junia, no, Mira yelled, as Thala raised his hand. Let her, Thala said, a cold amusement in his voice. What will she do? Sing to them. The hymn is absolute. Junia reached the console. She plugged her datapad into the port. Her fingers flew. It is based, she said, her voice shaking, on a Terran lullaby. One Avery, one he was humming. The mathematical structure is perfect. It is simple harmony. It is the opposite of the null. She hit a key. A new sound entered the room. It was tiny. It was a simple 5-note melody, a children's song from a dead world. It was Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It was immediately drowned out by the roar of the null hymn. Pathetic, Thale said. She is not alone, Mira said. She walked to her sister. She placed her hand on Junia's shoulder. She closed her eyes, and she began to chant. It was not a lullaby. It was the ancient, holy language of the Cylindri. A string of complex, resonant words that had been used to build the lattice. It was a song of creation, of connection, of life. Mira wove her chant into Junia's simple melody. The effect was instantaneous. The lullaby gave the chant structure, and the chant gave the lullaby power. The combined song, the counter-song, hit the emergency broadcast channel. The null hymn faltered. The cold, dead note of the broadcast was suddenly met with a warm, complex, and furiously defiant harmony. Thale roared, clutching his head, his mirrored mask cracking. No silence. Silence. He raised a plasma weapon and aimed it at Junia. No, Avery yelled. He did not think. He just acted. He ran at Thale. But as he ran, his engineer's mind saw the console. The Atlas. The black, oily light. It was pulsing, tied directly into the station's main power core. The entire tower was a single, massive weapon, and Thale was pointing it at Junia. If Avery burned Thale, if he unleashed his threshold as a weapon, the feedback, the psychic backlash, would detonate the console. It would rupture the core. It would not just destroy the tower. It would vaporize half the spoke. I will not use it, unless it is to save a life. He was not a soldier. He was a rescuer. He did not tackle Thale. He dove, past him, and slammed both of his hands onto the main console, directly onto the port where the Atlas was docked. He did not attack. He contained. He opened his threshold. All of it. The cold, Hecate reach rage. The warm, protective shield. The chaotic, engineer's mind. He shoved it all, every last drop of his will, into the machine. He was not trying to kill the null hymn. He was trying to lock it. The console screamed. The black light of the Atlas met the white-hot light of Avery's mind. It was not an explosion. It was a crystallization. He felt the null wave freeze. He forced a psychosonic choke into the broadcast. A feedback loop of silence. He was using his own mind as a ground, absorbing the entire hateful song into himself. The strain was the single most painful thing he had ever experienced. He felt his blood vessels burst in his eyes. The broadcast stopped. Thale, free of the hymn's backlash, looked at him, his cracked mask reflecting Avery's agonized face. You are just an engineer, after all," he snarled. "You stop the threat. You do not end it." Thale slammed his fist on a red panel. A wall behind him slid open, revealing an emergency escape gate. He grabbed the atlas from the now-dead console. "This," he said, holding the sphere aloft, "was just the first verse. The song. The song is not over." He leaped through the gate, and it sealed behind him. For a moment, there was silence. Blessed, wonderful, absolute silence. "He is gone," Junia whispered, her hands still on the console. Sable helped Thomas to his feet. "We won." Avery collapsed against the console, his body shaking, his vision swimming. We won." Then a new alarm blared, a loud, mechanical klaxon. Red lights flashed. A synthesized voice announced, "Structural integrity failure. Structural integrity failure. Mainspire detachment protocol engaged." Avery looked up, his bloodshot eyes wide. "Oh, no." He looked at the sealed gate Thale had escaped through. He did not just escape." The entire room shook, a bone-jarring, metallic groan. Mira grabbed his arm. "Avery, what is happening?" "He did not just run," Avery whispered, his mind putting the pieces together. He cut the tower." Through the massive viewport, they did not see the station anymore. They saw the station falling away from them. A series of explosive bolts fired, the sound a deafening boom. The entire top section of the communications tower, the room they were in, tore free from its moorings. They were falling. "Brace," Avery screamed, as gravity, the station's artificial, rotational gravity, vanished, replaced by the sickening lurch of freefall. They were tumbling, end over end, through the viewport. Avery saw their trajectory. They were falling down, through the spoke, toward the central axis, toward the market, the Academy market, the place it had all started. Thousands of people, now emerging from their shops, confused, dazed by the sudden silence, were looking up. "No," Avery whispered. "No, not again. I will not watch another fire." This was it. This was the moment. His vow, to save a life. He stood up, planting his feet on the bulkhead, which was now the floor. He ignored the others, who were tumbling in zero gravity. He ignored his bleeding eyes, his screaming nerves. He unleashed the threshold. He did not shield. He did not dampen. He pushed. He reached out with his mind, with the white-hot furnace of his will, and he grabbed the thousands of tons of falling metal. The strain was so great, he did not even scream. It was beyond sound. The metal of the tower groaned, fighting his will. He saw the market. He saw the people. He saw 3 sectors to the left. The primary water reclamation reservoir, a massive, open, artificial lake, empty. He pushed. He roared, a soundless, psychic bellow, and he bent their trajectory. He fought physics, gravity, and inertia with nothing but his mind. The tower shifted. It veered, scraping the side of a residential spire, a shower of sparks. It missed the market. It plunged, nose first, into the massive reservoir. The impact was a colossal, churning eruption of water. The viewport cracked. The room flooded instantly with cold, recycled water. Avery felt nothing. He had spent it all. The heat was gone, leaving only a cold, dark, empty void. The last thing he saw, before the darkness took him, was the blurry, panicked, beautiful face of Mira, swimming toward him. He woke, choking, on something solid. He was on the half-submerged wreckage of the tower, lying on his back. The alarms were still blaring. People were shouting, somewhere far away. He was so cold. He was so tired. He coughed, and water came up. "He is breathing," Junia's voice said. "He is an idiot," Sable's voice grunted. He opened his eyes. Mira was kneeling over him. Her silver hair was plastered to her face. Her perfect, diplomatic tunic was torn and soaked. She was shaking from the cold. She looked, he thought, completely and utterly undone. And she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He tried to smile. Did we win?" Mira looked down at him. She looked at the chaos, the flooded sector, the screaming people, the ruined tower. She looked at him, the bleeding, half-drowned man who had just saved them all. She did not smile. She just sighed, a sound of profound, cosmic-level exasperation. "You said," she whispered, her voice rough, "you wanted one quiet roommate." Avery tried to laugh, but he was already unconscious. Avery woke to the sound of a steady, rhythmic beep that he associated with system diagnostics. His first thought was that the number 3 filter unit in Sector Zeta was finally failing. His second thought, as his senses returned, was cold. He was not in his apartment. He was in a sterile, white room. The light was low. He was in a bed. The beeping was a medical monitor beside him. He tried to sit up and was instantly struck by a wave of dizziness and a deep, full body ache that felt less like an injury and more like a profound, cosmic-level hangover. "Do not," a dry voice from the corner said. "Try to move. Your body's energy levels are," and I am quoting Dr. Amin, "a statistical impossibility, bordering on a rounding error." Avery turned his head. Captain Imani Rhodes sat in a chair, her dark blue uniform immaculate, her expression exhausted. "Captain," Avery rasped. The tower," Rhodes said, "is currently a very large, very expensive piece of scrap metal at the bottom of the Sector 8 reservoir. You saved the market. You saved thousands of people. You also caused 3 billion credits worth of structural damage and flooded the station's primary water reclamation system." "So, a mixed result," Avery whispered. "You have been unconscious for 2 days. Cole," she said, leaning forward. "The riot stopped the instant that damn song did. The station is a mess. We are finding tribunal cells, weapons caches, everywhere. It is a full-scale purge. But Thale is gone. He used that escape gate of his and just vanished, slipped off station in the chaos. He is gone. And he took that glowing ball of his with him." Avery closed his eyes. He had failed. He had stopped the battle, but lost the war. The Atlas was gone. "Where?" he began. "Where are the sisters?" He felt the answer before she spoke. He reached out, not with his threshold, but just with his mind, to the space where the crown lattice bond had been. It was not gone. It was just distant, but it was there, and it was stronger. He felt the 3 distinct signatures, not as anchors in a storm, but as a steady, warm current. He felt Mira's sharp focus, Junia's bright curiosity, and Sable's deep calm, all flowing somewhere else. "They are in the diplomatic wing," Rhodes said, her voice softening. "They have been waiting. Their mother is here, in system. She arrived a day ago." An hour later, Avery was on his feet. Dr. Amin had looked at his charts, looked at him, and declared his recovery a violation of known biology. He was weak, he was shaking, but he was dressed, not in his engineer's jumpsuit, but in a clean, borrowed set of dark civilian clothes. Rhodes escorted him to the Spoke's high diplomatic chamber. The room was vast, the ceiling a transparent dome, showing the swirling orange fury of Caldera below. Mira, Sable, and Junia stood in the center, not as roommates, but as princesses. They wore formal cylindry gowns of silver and deep blue. Their hair was bound, and they radiated a regal authority that made Avery feel like a janitor who had wandered into the wrong room. Mira met his eyes. Her face was unreadable, but through the bond, he felt a jolt of something. Relief. Welcome. Before them, a holographic throne room was projected, and on the throne sat Empress Saravine. She was not what Avery had expected. She was not an ancient crone or a fierce warrior queen. She was a woman in her prime, with hair the color of new copper, and eyes that held the calm of 1,000 years. She looked kind, and that, Avery knew, made her infinitely more dangerous. Avery Cole, the Empress's voice filled the room, a warm, resonant alto. The engineer who requested a quiet room. You have caused my court strategists and my daughters more trouble than the entire Pale Tribunal. Your Majesty, Avery said, his throat dry. I apologize for the inconvenience. Do not, she said, a faint smile touching her lips. You, and your stubborn vow, are precisely what was required. Her face grew serious. Executor Thale has not fled. He has advanced. The Conquered Atlas was not just a map, it was a key. He has used it to open a resonant corridor, a path our ships cannot follow, to a place from the First Age. He has gone to the Halo of Saints. Junia stepped forward. Your Majesty, the Halo is a myth, a collection of ice asteroids in an unstable orbit. It is not a real place. It is real, my daughter, Saravine said, her voice somber. It is a ring of ancient, crystalline entities that predate our race. They are natural amplifiers for the lattice, and at its heart, carved into the greatest of them, is a temple of conduction, a place of ultimate power. Thale has gone there to do what he could not do on Caldera. He is not just broadcasting a song. He intends to activate the everlasting lock, a perversion of the lattice itself, designed to permanently, sever all empathetic connection between our species. He will not just create chaos. He will create an eternity of cold, isolated order, a galaxy of strangers. Silence filled the room. The magnitude of it was crushing. So we fight, Sable said, her voice a low growl. We take your fleet, Mother, and we break him. No, Saravine said, and her voice was absolute. The hologram flickered, changing to an external view. Avery's jaw dropped. A fleet had arrived. It hung in the black, over Caldera, but it was not a war fleet. There were no dreadnoughts, no battlecruisers. It was a fleet of white ships, medical frigates, transport vessels, search and rescue craft, a flotilla of civilian ships. Thale's crime, the Empress said, her voice ringing with authority, was against civilization. It must be civilization that answers him. His act was one of hate. We will meet it with life. I will not make him a martyr in a glorious battle. He will be brought before the Continuum, before the Kathir, before the Xylos, and he will be judged. He must be taken alive. You cannot be serious, Mira said, stepping forward, her voice shaking with fury. Mother, he has a war band, the Null Choir. He will slaughter those crews. He will not, Saravine said, because you will lead my personal guard. Mira, you will go to the Halo. You will use this rescue flotilla as your shield and your sword. You will apprehend him. Mira's shoulders straightened. I will. But you will not go alone, the Empress said. Her gaze, ancient and all-knowing, settled on Avery. You will be advised by Avery Cole. Avery felt his blood freeze. What no? Your Majesty. I am an engineer. I just want my room back. You are the only human, Saravine said, who has ever been bound by a crown pact. You hold the bond of three, yet you have the heart of one. You understand the logic of a machine, and you understand the illogic of a trilobite in broth. My daughter understands strategy. You, Engineer Cole, understand people. She will command the Cylindri. You will have joint command of this civilian action group. Avery looked at Mira. Her face was a perfect mask of diplomatic horror. Mother, Mira began, he is a civilian. He is not trained. And that, Saravine interrupted, is why he is essential. This is not a military operation. This is a rescue of our entire civilization from a madman. You, my daughter, seek the path to victory. He, I suspect, will seek the fastest path to a quiet life. He will seek the fastest path to peace. The human federated continuum has lent him to us for this task. This was it. The human element. Not aggression, not strength. Flexibility. The willingness to take responsibility. The sheer, stupid audacity of an engineer who thinks he can fix the galaxy's plumbing. Avery looked at the Empress. He looked at the three sisters. He thought of Hecate Reach. He thought of the market. He sighed. It was the sigh of a man who knows he is about to miss another night's sleep. All right, Avery said. But if I am in command, I am ordering better coffee. This station's synthetic is terrible. The halo of saints was not a belt. It was a necklace, strung around a pale, newborn star. The saints were kilometer-long shards of pure ice, crystals that had formed in a cloud of exotic matter, and they sang with a faint, psychic resonance. It was beautiful, and it was cold. Aboard the Empress's command frigate, the Serene Heart, Avery stood on the bridge. It was not a warship. It was a hospital ship, refitted for command and control. Around them floated the civilian flotilla. Thale is here, Mira said, her voice tense. She stood at the central holo display. He has a small fleet of tribunal ships, black market raiders, guarding the main temple, the one carved into the largest crystal, the Saint Prime. And he is broadcasting, Junia muttered from her own console. A low-level null field. Not a song. Just a dampener. He is making it hard to think, hard to connect. He is setting the stage, Avery said, sipping a cup of actual, real, bean coffee. The Empress had delivered. He is in the temple, preparing the lock. The ships are just a screen. We cannot fight them, Mira said. They are military. We are doctors and rescue pilots. Exactly, Avery said. We are not a hammer. We are a scalpel. So we do what we do best. We rescue people. Mira looked at him. Rescue who? The tribunal? No, Avery said. We rescue the lost ice miners. Junia snorted. Sable raised an eyebrow. Mira just stared. What lost ice miners? Mira asked, her voice dangerously level. The ones we are about to broadcast a distress call for, Avery said. Junia, can you fake a low-level human prospector beacon? Something that looks like it got hit by a plasma vent. Put it deep in the asteroid field, away from the temple. Avery, Mira said. This is not a joke. This is a war. No, Avery said, turning to her, his eyes hard. This is a responsibility. You heard your mother. We are a civilian group. We are here to take Thale alive. We cannot do that if we are fighting his fleet. So we give them a choice. They can shoot at us. A bunch of unarmed hospital ships on a rescue mission. and look like monsters to the entire galaxy. Or they can let us pass. It is a risk, Mira said, her voice tight. Those are civilian lives. This whole damn thing is a risk to civilian lives, Avery shot back, his voice quiet but fierce. We are here because we choose to be. We are the ones who take the hit so that the people back on the spoke, the ones who just want to eat at Skorg's, do not have to. That is the job. That is the responsibility we accepted. Now, Junia, please. The beacon. The next 2 hours were a masterpiece of human flexibility and Cylindri precision. Mira, grasping the insane logic of the plan, took charge. She rerouted the flotilla. They were no longer an invasion force. They were a search and rescue task force. They broadcast on all channels. Unknown human vessel in distress. Coordinates locked. Medical teams en route. We are a non-combatant flotilla. We request all vessels respect our neutrality. It was a gutsy, brilliant move. The tribunal ships were stymied. They could not fire on a rescue fleet without exposing their true nature. They were a political movement. This was a political attack. As the main flotilla of white ships drew the tribunal fleet toward the fake beacon, a single, small, dark ship detached from the Serene Heart. It was a stealth shuttle, designed for atmospheric insertion. On board Avery, Mira, Sable, and Junia. Mira, Avery said, as he piloted the ship toward the St. Prime crystal. Your mother is a terrifying woman. You are only just realizing this, Mira shot back, her hands flying over a tactical console. The temple was a cavern of glowing, azure ice. It was not carved by tools, but by sound. The walls were a symphony of frozen light, all of it resonating with Thales' low, insistent null field. They landed in a shadowed alcove. The moment the ramp lowered, they were met. He was a Cylindri, massive, in ornate, jet-black armor that seemed to drink the light. In each hand, he held a staff that crackled with the black, negative energy of the null choir. He was the champion. Go, Sable said. Her voice was not a request. It was a command. She drew her blade. This one is mine. He was at my father's execution. Go, secure the altar. Sable, Mira began. I am not your shield today, sister, Sable said, her dark eyes fixed on the champion. I am your sword. Go. Mira hesitated, then nodded. She grabbed Avery's arm. This way. They ran, leaving Sable to face her past. The temple was a maze of crystalline bridges and glowing chasms. I have to split off, Junia said, pointing to a glowing conduit in the ice. The altar is a focus. The actual broadcast node, the conduction point, is below us. I can disrupt it. I can create a countersong. Go, Avery said, nodding. And I, Mira said, stopping at a nexus of glowing ice pillars. Must coordinate the flotilla. The rescue is a distraction, but it is a real one. Our ships are still at risk. I can use these ice pillars. They are resonating. I can bounce signals through them. Create a secure tactical net. She set up her mobile command post. Thale is at the main altar, straight ahead. That is you. Avery. Me. Avery looked at him. I am the engineer. You are the strategist. And you, Mira said, her silver blue eyes intense, are the only one he will underestimate. Go. Be the engineer. Be the human. Be the anchor. He ran, alone. The null field grew stronger, colder. The air grew thick with the anti-sound. It clawed at his mind, trying to tear the lattice bond away. But this time, Avery was not hiding. He was not anchored by a story. He was anchored by a purpose. He opened his threshold, deeper than he had in the tower, deeper than he had at Hecate Reach. He did not let the rage burn. He let it shine. He felt the bond to the three sisters, now separated. but never more connected. He felt Sable's iron will. He felt Junia's bright hope. He felt Mira's fiery logic. The crown lattice, their bond, became his armor. He projected his power, not as a weapon, but as a shield, a bubble of pure, defiant empathy. On a bridge of ice, Sable faltered, her blade locked with the champion's staves. The null field was draining her. Suddenly, she felt a wave of warmth, a sudden, fierce certainty. She felt her sisters. She felt Avery. She roared, and her blade flashed. At her console, Mira saw her signals flicker and die. The null field was jamming her. Then, her screen flooded with light. The signal was clear. It was not just clear, it was amplified. She was not bouncing signals off ice. She was bouncing them off of Avery Cole's stubborn mind. Avery was a mobile psychic repeater. He was a human satellite dish for the soul. He burst into the main chamber. It was a vast cathedral of ice, open to the stars. A bridge of pure crystal light spanned a chasm of glowing cosmic dust. And at the center, at the altar, stood Thale. His mask was gone. His face was a mask of ecstatic, terrible joy. The conquered Atlas was slotted into a spire of ice, pulsing with a black, oily light, the everlasting lock. "You are too late, engineer." Thale screamed over the din. "The song is set. The final note is about to be struck. The age of chaos is over. The age of purity begins." He raised his hands and slammed them down on the altar. The final chord, a wave of pure, black negation, the ultimate null song, began to build, a tsunami of cold, aimed at the heart of the galaxy. Avery saw it. He felt it. He felt the white-hot fire of Hecate Reach rise in his chest. He could break it. He had the power. He could shatter the altar, the Atlas, and Thale, all in one, glorious blast of vengeance. Do not become them. Mira's voice. Save a life. His own vow. He did not attack. He did not fight. He stepped into the wave. He did not block the null note. He joined it. He pushed his own threshold, his own unique frequency, the human frequency, the chaotic, hopeful, stubborn, stupid, trilobite bone broth frequency, into the broadcast. He did not break the note. He created a harmony. He turned Thale's monotone dirge into a complex, polyphonic, devastating chord. The broadcast changed. The everlasting lock did not lock. It did not break. It became the bridge tune. And it hit everyone. It was not a weapon. It was a mirror. It was a song that forced every single being who heard it to, instantly, overwhelmingly, feel the consequences of their actions, from the perspective of their victims. On the ice bridge, the null champion felt the agony of Mira's father. He felt the terror of the hundreds he had emptied. He felt Sable's cold, burning grief. He stopped. He stumbled. He dropped his staves, and he began to weep. A raw, animal sound he had not made in decades. All over the halo, the tribunal soldiers on their ships, the null choir in the temple. They were paralyzed, not by force, by empathy. They were not dead. They were broken open. The resonance platform at the altar, unable to handle the sudden, complex frequency, cracked and collapsed. Thale was on his knees. He was gasping, clutching his head. His face was a mask of pure, undiluted horror. He was not seeing the stars. He was seeing a green-orange fire. He was feeling Hecate Reach. He was feeling the death of Mira's father. He was feeling the cold loneliness of Thomas Bell. He was feeling everything. What did you do to me?" he whispered, his voice broken. The pain." Avery stood over him. He was exhausted. He was bleeding from the nose and ears. But he was calm. "It is not pain, Thale," Avery said. his voice quiet. "It is just feeling. It is the world." "It is a lie," Thale screamed, looking up, his eyes no longer mad, but filled with a raw, new hate. "A chain. Compassion is just a chain." Avery knelt, so his face was level with Thale's. "It is not a chain," he whispered, his voice for Thale alone. "It is an anchor. It is the thing that stops one ship from crashing into another shore." Avery did not hit him. He did not burn him. He pulled a small, silver device from his belt, a psycho-sonic cuff. He clasped it on Thale's wrist. It emitted a low, soft hum. "You are under arrest," Avery said, "by the authority of the Human Diaspora Trust, for crimes against everyone." The halo of saints, which had been resonating with the cold null field, began to change. The light in the ice temple shifted from a cold, sterile blue to a warm, glowing white. The temple was thawing. Mira, Junia, and Sable arrived. Sable's blade was sheathed. Junia was supporting a weeping null champion. Mira looked at the broken, fetal Thale. She looked at the dozens of tribunal soldiers on the bridge, all of them disarmed, all of them crying. "What is our order?" Sable asked, her hand on her sword hilt. Mira looked at Avery. Then, she touched her comm unit. "The Empress's order. It is retrieve the wounded." Her gaze swept the room, landing on the broken enemy. "All of them," Mira said, her voice firm. "The tribunals, and our own. Our medical ships are for everyone." The return to Caldera spoke was quiet. The war, if it could be called that, had been fought and won in the span of a few days, not with bombs and dreadnoughts, but with a song and a stubborn engineer. The station was healing. The market in Sector Gamma was already being rebuilt. The jagged hole in the communications tower was being patched. And the water in the reservoir, though still tasting faintly of static and panic, was flowing. They sat in the Spoke's high diplomatic chamber. It was not a trial. It was a debriefing, a polite word for trying to figure out what, exactly, had just happened. Avery was there, along with Mira, Sable, and Junia. Captain Amani Rhodes stood in the corner, her arms crossed, her face impassive. Empress Saravine was present again, her holographic form presiding over the meeting with a serene, unnerving calm. A new figure was also present, a stiffly formal human man in the gray suit of the Federated Human Continuum Diplomatic Corps. "The Continuum," the man said, reading from a data slate, "wishes to extend its deepest gratitude to the Asteroid for its unconventional but effective handling of the tribunal crisis, and to Engineer Avery Cole." He paused and looked up, his expression one of official confusion. "For your actions in, well, in all of it. The Continuum is prepared to offer a full military commission, a field promotion to the rank of commander, and the Crimson Star of Valor for extreme flexibility under fire." Avery, who was sitting in a chair that was far too comfortable, rubbed his eyes. He was still tired. He felt like he had been tired for his entire life, and the last week had just been the finale. "No, thank you," Avery said. The diplomat blinked. I beg your pardon." "I decline," Avery said, his voice quiet. "I do not want a commission. I do not want a star. I want a nap." He looked up, not at the diplomat, but at the hologram of the Empress. "Your Majesty, Captain Rhodes. The bomb in the Academy market did a lot of damage. The riot, the tower. A lot of people who run small businesses, who just want to live their lives, got hurt. Skorg's noodle shop had its primary ventilation system smashed. The Zero-G tea house is still trying to filter foam out of its main chamber. The Academy lost archives." He leaned forward. "If the Continuum wants to give out a reward, Tell them to skip the medal. Ask them to start a reconstruction fund. A civilian-led fund, for the civilians who were caught in the middle. I am a maintenance man. I just want to make sure the plumbing works for everyone." The diplomat looked horrified. "That is highly irregular." "It is. However," Empress Seravine's voice cut through the room. "The correct answer." She smiled. A small, genuine expression. "The request is noted, Engineer Cole, and it will be fulfilled, which brings us to the matter of your employment." "I am employed," Avery said. "Station maintenance. I have 3 filter units in Sector Zeta that are probably screaming for me." "You have," the Empress said gently, "been operating under a misapprehension. Avery Cole, as have my daughters." She looked at Mira, Sable, and Junia. "You were not sent to his apartment by chance." "Mother," Mira began. "We know. He is the balancer. We—" "Hush, my strategic daughter," Seravine said, her voice kind. "You know what he is. You never knew why he needed you." She turned her gaze back to Avery. "The document you signed," the Empress said. "The Pact of Cohabitation. You thought it was a political maneuver, an alliance. You were wrong." "It was a lease," Avery insisted. With very aggressive subclauses." "It was a crown pact," Seravine corrected him. "One of the oldest, most powerful, and most dangerous bonds in Selendri lore. It was not a lease, engineer. It was a life support system. For you." Avery stared at her. "I do not understand. Your power, your threshold. You call it that. A fitting name. You stand on the threshold of your own power, terrified of what happens if you cross it. You call the sensation it creates threshold burn. You are not wrong. You are a human, born with a power that is akin to our own. But you were born without the crown lattice to stabilize it. You have no anchor. You are, if you will pardon the metaphor, a reactor without a containment shield." She let that sink in. Avery thought of Hecate Reach, of the fire, of the white-hot rage, of the arboretum, where he had almost burned the trees, of the tower, where he had almost broken himself. "You were," Seravine continued, "going to burn out, Avery Cole. Perhaps not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but one day, you would have lost control, or the power would have consumed you. It would have killed you. And, given your proximity to the station's core, it would have killed everyone else here, too." He felt a cold dread wash over him. "The Crown Pact was a gamble," the Empress said. "A desperate one. By binding you to my daughters, by linking your uncontrolled human threshold to their stable Selendri lattice. We hoped to save you. We hoped their 3 minds, their 3 anchors, could act as your containment shield. We hoped they could ground you, stabilize your burn." Avery looked at the 3 sisters. You knew this." Mira shook her head, her face pale. "We did not. We were told a different story. Mother." "I could not tell you," Seravine said, her voice aching with a mother's regret. "There was an ancient prophecy, of a balancer, a figure who would stand between our worlds. We have been watching for him for generations. When my agents found a human on a neutral station, a survivor of Hecate Reach, who was leaking so much raw psychosonic energy that he was inadvertently calming local disturbances. I knew. It was him. But he was unstable. He was in pain." "So," Junia whispered, her eyes wide, "you sent us. You told us it was a diplomatic mission. A phytosanitary expedition." "I told you," Seravine said, "to go and learn. I sent you to guard the balancer, as the prophecy demanded. I could not tell you that you were also his medicine, that your very presence, your lattice, was the only thing keeping him from detonating. I am sorry. It was a burden I had no right to place on you. Or on me, Avery said, his voice hoarse. He looked at his hands. The man who wanted one quiet roommate. He had requested it to save his sanity. He had been given 3 princesses to save his life. The room was silent for a long moment. Well, Captain Rhodes said from the corner, her voice a dry rumble. That explains the grocery bill. The tension snapped. Junia let out a sound that was half a sob and half a giggle. It also, Rhodes continued, walking forward, gives me an idea. The tribunal, the null choir. They are broken, but they are not the last threat. There will be other madmen, other songs. She looked at Avery, then at the sisters. What you all did, it was a mess. It was unorthodox, unsanctioned, and gave me the worst headache of my career. It was also brilliant. The way you combined your assets, human ingenuity, and Selendri discipline. Get to the point, Imani, Avery said, rubbing his temples. The point, Rhodes said, is that the Spoke is creating a new unit. The Interspecies Response Unit, civilian-led, station-funded, designed to handle threats that are not military, but are more than police can handle. Psychosonic threats, empathy weapons, political fallout. Congratulations, Mira said, her voice cool. A committee. A fast response team, Rhodes corrected. And it needs a consultant. Someone who understands the tech, but also understands the weird stuff. Someone who can talk to the Kathir about their fungi, and also reharmonize a psychic death choir. Someone who knows how to fix the plumbing. Avery looked at her. You cannot be serious. I am an engineer. You are the balancer, Cole, Rhodes said, her voice flat. Try to keep up. The job is yours. If you want it. It is a consultancy. You can still do your day job. But when the world gets weird, I call you. Avery looked at the Empress. He looked at the sisters. His life was never going to be quiet again. Was it? I will need a budget, he sighed. And better coffee. Later. The station was settling into its night cycle. The chaos of the debriefing was over. In the temporary refugee center, set up in the now drained and cleaned Academy Market Concourse, medical teams from the Serene Heart were tending to the dazed, the confused, and the recovering. Thomas Bell walked through the rows of cots. He was no longer an archivist. He was just a brother. He was looking for a face. Anna, he whispered, his voice cracking. Thomas. He turned. A young woman, pale and thin, with the same wide eyes as him, was sitting on a cot. She looked empty, hollowed out by the null hymn, but she was there. Anna, he cried, rushing forward, pulling her into an embrace. She did not hug him back. She just sat there. But then, as he held her, he felt her hand come up, slowly, and rest on his back. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. You came, she whispered. I came, he wept, holding her tight. In apartment 42, things were different, quieter, but not lonely. Junia was at the main table, her datapad glowing. She was typing furiously. What are you doing? Avery asked, sipping an actual hot cup of tea. Finishing my dissertation, Junia said, not looking up. The faculty at the academy thought my thesis on psychoacoustic harmony was fanciful. I am now adding a new chapter. Field applications of human lullabies in countering existential annihilation. I think they will find it has practical merit. Sable was not at the door. She was sitting on the floor by the main viewport, her legs crossed, her blade across her knees. She was not polishing it. She was just watching the station lights. She had watched her champion, the man who had killed her father, break down and be led away in cuffs, not by her sword, but by a song. She was learning that some burdens could be set down. She was learning to trust others to guard the door. Mira stood by the kitchen alcove, her arms crossed. She had traded her formal gown for a simple, dark tunic. She was a princess, a strategist, a warrior. And she was also just a woman, watching a man. She was torn between a duty to her throne and the profound, undeniable connection she felt to this impossible, stubborn human engineer who had saved them all with a story about soup. Avery was in the alcove. He had a small, white wax candle. He placed it on the counter and lit it. The small flame was a tiny, defiant point of warmth. "What is that for?" Mira asked quietly. Moving to stand beside him, Avery did not look at her. He watched the flame. "Hecate reach," he said, his voice low. Mira was silent. She understood. She felt the cold fire in him, the ancient grief. "I wanted to kill him," Avery whispered. "Thale, in the temple. I had him. I could have burned him for what he did. To my home. To my family." "Why did you not?" Mira asked. "Because I looked at him, and I saw a man in a cage, just like me. He was driven by his own grief, his own twisted logic, and I realized." He looked at the flame. "Revenge. It is not allowed to steer. It is a bad captain. It just wants to crash the ship. It cannot be the one at the helm." He looked at her. "But justice. Justice is the one who brings the ship home, even if it is damaged, even if it is hard." "My father," Mira said, her voice barely a whisper, "would have liked you." The Empress's hologram appeared on Avery's cheap terminal. It was the end of the day. The debriefing was truly over. Thale was in a holding cell, awaiting a full interspecies tribunal. The Continuum and the Asterate had agreed his trial would be public, his crimes laid bare for all to see. The Null Choir, those who had survived, were in medical custody. The bridge tune had not killed them. It had opened them. They were confused, remorseful, and terrified. The Empress's doctors were already designing empathy rehabilitation programs. It was a long road, but it was a road. "Avery Cole," the Empress said. Her voice was no longer regal. It was just a mother's. I owe you an apology. I threw my daughters into your life. I deceived you. I used you all as pawns in a game to save the galaxy. It was not my finest moment." Avery looked at the Empress of 1,000 worlds. He looked at the three sisters, his roommates, his anchors, his family. He was so tired. But for the first time, the threshold burn was gone. It was not a fire. It was a hearth, a warm, steady glow, tended by the three minds now permanently woven with his. He rubbed his forehead. "Your Majesty," Avery sighed. "We are even. But you owe me a quiet kitchen." A beat of silence. Then, Junia giggled, a bright, irrepressible sound. Sable. Sable actually snorted, a tiny, shocking sound of amusement. Captain Rhodes, who was still on the comm channel, let out a sharp bark of a laugh. Avery looked at Mira. Her face was a battleground of protocol and emotion won. She did not just smile. She laughed, a full, warm, genuine laugh. And in her holographic throne room, a galaxy away, Empress Saravine put her head in her hands. And she laughed too. It was the sound of healing, the sound of a war ending, the sound of a bill finally being paid. Caldera spoke, was rebuilding. The station no longer hummed with the cold. dissonant chord of the null hymn. It thrummed with the chaotic, hopeful sounds of construction. Plasma welders stitched, closed the wounds in the communications tower. New acrylic viewports were being fitted in the Academy market. Skorg, his noodle shop already rebuilt and operational, was yelling at a logistics officer about a delayed shipment of fungi. And the sound was, to Avery, the most beautiful music he had ever heard. His life was no longer simple. He still wore his engineer's jumpsuit, but his datapad was now filled with two kinds of work. In the morning, he rerouted atmospheric ducts. In the afternoon, he sat with Captain Imani Rhodes and Thomas Bell, officially accepting his new role as the civilian consultant to the Interspecies Response Unit. His first act was not to authorize a weapons system, but to use his old diaspora trust network, now backed by the full power of the asteroid, to establish a new emergency evacuation corridor for civilian populations. Get them out before the shooting starts network. His apartment on level 42 was no longer a sterile box. It was a home. The door slid open to a space that was lived in, crowded and loud. Junia had attached a small, stylized data slate to the exterior. It was a new door sign, in elegant, looping script. It read, "The kitchen is open when there is peace." Avery knew she had wanted to write, "Kitchen open, come on in." But Sable had insisted on an addendum following a full decontamination scan. The sign was their compromise. The relationships inside had settled. The bond of the Crown Pact was no longer a frantic, emergency connection. It was a deep, steady current, a shared warmth that hummed beneath his skin. Junia had hung a cluster of cylindry crystals from the main ventilation unit by the viewport. They were not mere decoration. They were resonant chimes, tuned, she had explained, to the station's core harmonic and the unique psychosonic signature of the apartment's occupants. They spun slowly, catching the light, singing a soft, barely audible song that soothed the nerves. Sable had changed the most, or perhaps had simply allowed herself to be seen. One evening, Avery had worked a double shift, first fixing a primary recycler, and then mediating a dispute between a Cathir ambassador and a human bureaucrat. He had collapsed on the sofa and fallen asleep instantly. He woke hours later, feeling a profound sense of calm. Junia showed him the security log the next day. The recording showed Avery, asleep, snoring loud enough to rattle the cheap coffee table. Sable was in the frame, sitting in her customary guard position. She watched him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since he had met her, her severe, stoic features softened. A tiny, almost imperceptible, and utterly shocking smile touched her lips. She had seen this chaotic, noisy man face down a godlike enemy with a story about soup. She had seen him snore. She shook her head, and the smile remained for a full 5 seconds. And Mira. His relationship with Mira had become a two-way pact. It was political. She was now the official asteroid liaison to Rhodes's new interspecies unit, and she and Avery were its core. They were partners, their minds working in tandem. But it was also emotional. It was the way she looked at him across the rebuilt market. A shared understanding. It was the hand she placed on his arm when he was growing frustrated in a meeting. It was the blanket she draped over him on the sofa that night, her touch lingering, a warm pulse through the lattice that was just for him. But there was one last thread to pull. Empress Saravine had not left the system. She had remained on her command ship, the Serene Heart, overseeing the start of Thale's trial. She summoned Avery, not to a hologram, to a private meeting. He stood once more in the high diplomatic chamber. This time, it was empty, save for the Empress herself, who stood in the center of the room. No throne, no regalia, just a simple silver gown. Mira stood by the door, her face a mask of neutrality. She had insisted on being his guard. "Avery Cole," Saravine said, her voice warm, but heavy with history. "We are in your debt, but I am in yours for a different reason. There is one final file that must be opened, one that has been sealed for a lifetime." She produced a physical data slate, dark and heavy. "Thale's trial has begun, but his actions were the end of a story, not the beginning. This is the beginning." She activated the slate. An image appeared, a holographic projection. It was not a battle. It was a lab, a research colloquium, centuries old. There were Selendri in archaic robes, and humans, in the simple, optimistic uniforms of the first federated continuum. They were standing around a conduit, a prototype, laughing. "The original Crown Lattice Project," Saravine narrated. "The Great Alliance, before the betrayal." "I have seen this," Avery said, his voice tense. "In the oratory." "You saw the event," the Empress said softly. "You did not see the participants." She zoomed the image. It focused on a human couple, smiling, their arms around each other. Then, it moved to a child at their feet. A small boy, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, with dark, unruly hair. He was not playing. He was on the floor with a Selendri elder, sketching on a slate. He was drawing complex, intersecting circles, resonant patterns that Avery instinctively recognized. Avery felt the blood drain from his face. "Who is that?" "That," Saravine said, her voice aching. "Is you," he stared. "That is impossible. I grew up on Hecate Reach." "You were hidden on Hecate Reach," Saravine corrected him. "You were born on Terra, the son of Doctors Eris and Alara Cole, the 2 lead human psychoacoustic engineers on the Crown Lattice Project. You were not just a child, Avery. You were a prodigy, a savant. You were born with a mind that could naturally hear the lattice. You did not just watch, you participated. The Selendri elders called you the Harmonizer. Some of the original sketches, the blueprints for the first bridge of empathy, they were drawn by your hand." Avery stumbled back, his hand going to his temple. The threshold burn. "The betrayal," Saravine continued, her voice cold with fury, "was not just political. It was personal. The human faction that turned. They wanted to weaponize the lattice, and they wanted you. You were the living proof of the Union, a human who could speak our language. Your parents fled with you. They went to Hecate Reach, a colony so remote, so unimportant. They thought you would be safe. They sealed my memory," Avery whispered, the pieces falling into place with the force of a planet shattering. "To protect me." "Yes," Saravine said. "With the help of Selendri sympathizers, they buried your past, your talents, your entire childhood. But the power, the imprint, it was too strong. Your mind, imprinted with the core code of the lattice, fought against those seals your entire life. The threshold, the burn. It was not a flaw, Avery. It was your own mind trying to remember who you were." Avery was shaking. The cold, white hot fire of his past was back, but it was different. It was not a vague sense of loss. It now had a face, a name, a target. "Hecate Reach," he said, his voice a rasp. "The fire. It was not. It was not an accident of war. It was not the tribunal." "The tribunal was a tool," Mira said from the door, her voice low and vibrating with a fury that matched his own. "The betrayers," Saravine said, "the human faction, never stopped looking for you. They found you. They found your family. They sent their own secret fleet. They burned the colony to the ground to find one boy. And when they were done, they used their new puppet, Executor Thala, to blame my people for the massacre. They turned their own atrocity into anti-Selendri propaganda." Avery looked at the Empress, And you, your dynasty, you knew. You knew they were hunting a child. You knew you were being framed. Saravine looked down. For the first time, the Empress looked ashamed. We were silent, to protect the secret of the lattice, to prevent an open, galactic war with a shadowy faction we could not even name. We were cowards. We let them frame us. We let Hecate reach burn. And we said nothing. We did not know you had survived. Not for decades. Not until my agents found a maintenance engineer on a neutral station, whose latent psychic signature was a perfect match for the lost harmonizer. So, Avery said, the word cold and flat. You did not send your daughters to me by chance. No, Saravine admitted, meeting his gaze. I sent them for two reasons. First, to protect you, as the ancient prophecy of the balancer demanded. But second, her voice cracked, just once, as an apology, an atonement, a debt that my throne owed your blood. I could not save your parents, but I sent the three things I love most in this universe to save their son. Avery stood there, vibrating with the revelation. His entire life, his grief, his vow, his threshold burn, all of it was a lie, wrapped around a single, buried truth. He had it now. The names of the original betrayers, the ones who had killed his parents, the ones who had started it all. The cold fire in his chest roared. He could burn the galaxy down to find them. He had the power. He had the motive. He had the Empress's debt. He looked past Saravine, through the viewport. He could see the station. He saw the lights of the rebuilt market. He saw the tiny transit cars, moving with purpose. He heard, in his mind, Skorg yelling, Junia laughing, Sable snorting. He felt Mira, standing at the door, a wall of fire and logic, ready to back whatever play he made. He had spent his entire life wanting to avenge the fire. He looked at the Empress. He let out a breath. The cold fire did not go out. It settled. It became a forge. No, he said, his voice clear. Saravine looked confused. No. No more blood, Avery said. No more secrets. No more revenge. I will not be their weapon. I will not be yours. I am done with the past. He walked past her, picking up the data slate. But I want one thing. Thale's trial is starting. The Interspecies Tribunal. Yes. I want this file opened, Avery said, holding up the slate. All of it. Not just Thale. The Great Betrayal. The names of the human faction that killed my parents. The names of the Selendri who stayed silent. All of it. I want it public. No more shadows. No more lies. Let history be the judge. Let the light do the work. Empress Saravine looked at the engineer, at the balancer, at the man who had refused a throne's worth of vengeance. She inclined her head. As you wish. That night, Avery stood at the viewport in apartment 42. The station was a galaxy of light against the dark. The air was still. Then, a faint breeze from the recycler kicked on. The chimes Junia had hung by the door stirred. They let out a clear, sweet, harmonious sound. A series of notes that rose and fell. Avery put a hand on his chest. His heart was beating, slow, steady, calm. The threshold was not a burn. It was a warmth, the song of the chimes and the rhythm of his heart. They were in sync. He was, for the first time in his life, perfectly, completely, quiet. A hand touched his. He did not flinch. He knew her touch. Mira stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder, looking out at the lights. I was reviewing the station logs, she said, her voice a low, teasing murmur. I found your original housing application, the one that started all this. Avery groaned. Do not. One quiet roommate, Mira said, a smile in her voice. That was the entire request. Quiet. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He could feel her presence, a steady fire of logic and affection, wrapped around his own. You asked for one, she whispered. You got 3, and a revolution. There are no refunds. I will manage, he said. Good. Now come on. She tugged his hand. Junia is trying to make that trilobite broth you lied about, and Sable is threatening to detain her for violating basic culinary decency. Your presence as a mediator is required. He let her pull him away from the window. He looked back at the small table, crowded with people, with life, with noise. The smell of bone broth was starting to fill the air. Outside, the lights of Caldera Spoke shone, and beyond them, the stars, cold and silent, waited, their doors still open.